OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to OTB AM. We're here with you every morning from 7:30 all the way through until 10 o'clock. It's Gilroy with you. And my virtual co-host this morning is none other than Dave McIntyre. Dave, how the hell are you?
I'm very well, Ger. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very good. Back after a couple of weeks of R&R, they call it when you're at home with your kids these days.
And have you got a newfound perspective on life? You're relaxed. All the stresses and tribulations of life have evaporated from your mind, and you're a brand new you starting this morning.
Well, you know, I mean, you always try and come back supercharged. Isn't that how this thing works? And until
that's the theory.
The daily grind breaks you down. Football's back in the Premier League over the space of essentially 5 days now. And I think the big winner from all of this has been fans. The fact that they are so integral to the well-being of the game, to what our sense of what it means to be a football supporter or watcher or consumer. That whole notion of the fans as the crop to be cultivated by the football clubs and to have their money taken essentially for the value of them wanting to show up for their loyalty. I think all that, I really hope that fans are going to start flexing their muscles a bit more into the future.
So do you feel that if, for example, in some terrible, nightmarish, hypothetical situation, this was to go on for a number of years, that the game would be irreparably damaged, or that clubs would just move on?
Well, I don't think that... they'll have to come up with some alternative where virtual fans are making live virtual reactions to what's happening as opposed to pre-recorded crowd noise. It struck me yesterday, I was listening to the Villa game on the radio. We obviously had live commentary of it, and with I think about 5 minutes left to go, Damien Delaney makes the point. 2-1 down at home, lumping the ball forward. This is exactly where, and they've just won a free kick. This is exactly where the Villa fans are up on the whole down. They're like, come on! Instead, it's eerie silence. And he's like, oh, look, Chelsea are just going to see this out. And they did. They did just see it out.
Yeah.
So there's a pointlessness, it feels like, to games without supporters in some ways.
Yeah, players are still wheeling away from the goalmouth after they put the ball into the back of the net to celebrate with fans that aren't there. It takes them a half a second to realise what the new normal is. And look, yeah, if you're looking for an example of the importance of fans, just have a look at that Merseyside derby last night, which is probably the worst Merseyside derby I've ever watched. And I've been watching them for the gut to 35 years. And it was terrible. It's one of those games that goes into the category of there's 2 hours of my life that I'll simply never get back. And we know how important the crowd is to the Merseyside derby. So yeah, look, it doesn't paint a pretty picture of what football could be like into the long term if this is the way it's going to go. You pray that fans will be allowed back in the short term. I think Everton will be happy enough. For some clubs, not playing in front of their home fans at times is a blessing. I don't think it affected Everton too much yesterday. They haven't done much against Liverpool at home in 10 years. But definitely from a team in the bottom three that is desperate to make something happen in the last 5 minutes, and you've got the Holt end at Villa Park roaring you on. Huge significance there, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Right, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of some of these football stories a little bit later on with Gary Breen. I'm going to tell you what's coming up on the show. 8:10 this morning, Gary Breen is going to join us. We'll do the sports pages around about 8:35. Alan Quinlan's going to join us to talk about a bit of rugby around about 8:50 this morning. And then the BMW run and ride in aid of Pieta House, our cycling coach, Michael Black, is going to join us. So if you have any questions about getting good value from your cycling, then feel free to get in touch with us. You can WhatsApp us. 0879 180 180 is the number, or you can always tweet the show at Off the Ball. And then Mt Rushmore today is Fermanagh. Declan Bogue and Colm Bradley have been charged with picking the 4 heads that we'll carve into the side of a mountain in Fermanagh. On the side of a hill, maybe, or floated up from a lake in Fermanagh. Maybe that's what we do on hot air balloons. Maybe that's the way that works. So that's what's coming up on the show for you this morning between now and 10 o'clock. As ever, we'd love to hear from you. Use the hashtag OTBAM. Let's get some reaction from the return of the Premier League over the course of the weekend. We had 2 live games on the OTB Sports app. Newcastle beat Sheffield United 3-0. Stephen and Damien Delaney were on duty for that one. For the Villa-Chelsea game. Nathan and Brian Kerr were on duty for the Newcastle-Sheffield United game. Here's what Brian Kerr and first Damien Delaney made of the weekend's football. Have a look.
Former Republic of Ireland international Damien Delaney, we've just been watching the action at Villa Park, 2-1 win for Chelsea. I suppose when we saw what happened in the first half, we were thinking, well, it's a Chelsea win all day. Do you think there was any doubt in their minds going into the dressing room once they conceded that goal to Aston Villa, or they've been confident all along they would still see the game out and get the win?
I think managers like Frank Lampard set a game plan in place, and if his players can execute it, he knows that 99 times out of 100 they'll win the game. Now, even if they go behind, he won't panic, because you know if they go behind and the players aren't implementing what he wants, that means they're losing because things aren't going as he planned. But I thought that first half went exactly as he planned, apart from the goal. And he knows that on the law of averages, if they go out in the second half, he's been a part of enough Chelsea teams where they won games late. He knows that if they keep asking the right questions, keep knocking away, eventually the rewards will come, because Villa can't hold out. Not when the possession is 75% and above. And I know you said at the start the second half it was up to 90-10 at one point. Nobody can withstand that. Eventually the door is going to open.
Would you say that win now is enough for Chelsea to kind of think this top 4 place is ours, we will be in the Champions League next season?
They
still have a bit more to do, do you
think? The thing I say is, who behind them is going to put a run together to catch them? So I'm not saying that they're home and hose just yet, but I think that they've put themselves in a position where they can, even if they have a little spell where they draw 2 games, the ones behind them aren't winning, 7 out of 8 games. Man United aren't putting together a run like that. Spurs aren't, or Arsenal aren't putting a run together like that. I mean, maybe someone like a Crystal Palace or a Sheffield United or Wolverhampton is what you'd be worried about, because maybe they could, under the radar, put that type of a run together, but it'd be a surprise. So all Chelsea need to do now is maintenance. Just keep tipping away, keep adding the wins, keep getting a couple of draws. With a 5-point cushion, they have a little bit of wriggle room where if they do have a bad couple of results, they'll still be okay.
Big game for them on Thursday against Manchester City coming up. That one at Stamford Bridge. Look, we know home form doesn't seem to hold any water when teams are playing behind closed doors. We've seen it in Germany. It seems to be happening in the Premier League as well. What are Chelsea hoping for from that game? Well, obviously 3 points, but against a really good Manchester City team, do you think they will beat them on Thursday night?
I think this Chelsea team are kind of in its infancy of doing something good. They really have put a good plan in place. They've put a good transfer kind of system in place where they're buying young players. And although they lost to Bayern Munich, and they'll more than likely lose the second leg as well, and games like Manchester City, I think Frank Lampard will be using those as a learning curve for the future, so that his young players are used to playing in big games, used to come up against calibre of opposition of a Bayern Munich and a Manchester City and a Liverpool. So when they play against them afterwards, he can say that's a level we've got to get to, because they are out in front of us at the moment. So while he will be looking for 3 points, he'll also be thinking this is an invaluable experience for the likes of Mason Mount, the likes of Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Ross Barkley, saying to these guys, look, this is the standard we got to get to, and then with Timo Werner coming in next season, they're definitely on the road to getting there. So he will be looking for 3 points, but I think he won't be expecting a whole pile.
I'll come back to Timo Werner. You mentioned during the commentary about the FA Cup, and it's a really good chance for Lampard to get a trophy in his first season. Do you think he'll go all out to try and get that FA Cup win?
I think the Champions League will be a priority, but with the cushion he's given himself, I definitely think that he will now be looking for all guns out going for the FA Cup, because again, it's part of the learning curve for these young guys that he's assembling, with the Pulisic. Can they get to a cup final? And can they experience a cup final? Insofar as, even if they win or lose it, if they win, they can say, okay, we've got a trophy under our belt. If they lose it, they can say, okay, listen, we still got a little bit to go, and we still want to win cup competitions. So for these guys to play in games of that magnitude, the Manchester City's, Bayern Munich, FA Cup finals, that's the kind of their next stepping stone, really.
You mentioned Timo Werner. He's coming in for a big price tag, just under 60 million. A lot of people wondered about the Roman Abramovich project. He's not around London these days, whether his heart was fully in the Chelsea setup, whether he might have been considering selling the club onto another club owner. But he seems to be putting money into the club again. He's investing in players. Timo Werner comes in at a big price tag. Which player in that Chelsea team is most worried about his position? Because you don't pay that amount of money for a player to sit on the bench.
No, he's going to come in and play, and it's pretty obvious where he's going to play. I think he's going to play up front, and maybe not a traditional number 9, but he's definitely going to play in probably looking at today's team, instead of Giroud as a number 9, or maybe Willian, because Willian's getting on now, and I know he's a contract issue there as well, insofar as whether he's going to stay or not. So. But again, a player of that quality coming in is going to elevate Chelsea to another level again. With Abramovich, I think he's realised that he can't keep pouring money at the rate that he was in. They've got a strategy now, and I know the Timo Werner money probably offset by the Morata money. So has he really just put 60 million of his own? He's not. I think he's probably said years ago, I'm not doing this anymore. We can't just keep going out buying the top talent in the world, because, you know, although he's a very wealthy man, he's not, you know, state backed, which some teams are now. So he's realised that he can't compete in that end where he can go and spend 200 million. Back in the early 2000s, he could just come in and spend 50 million, and nobody could do that back then. So he kind of changed the game. So they've realised this, and they've gone down a different route, you know, where we have to sell to generate money, and we're going to buy young players. And if we can sell on players at their peak and make 80, 90, 100 million off them, then we'll reinvest that in young players. And I think that was their strategy for a long time now. But look, Timo Werner is a fantastic player. He fits really well with what Chelsea are trying to do. And it's great to see a club with a really good transfer strategy.
Speaking of money and spending money, Aston Villa spent a lot of it at the start of this season. And if you spend that amount of money, you would expect to be staying in the Premier League. But we've seen it so many times, Damien, with teams coming up and blowing a load of money on players and can't seem to fit those players into a steady kind of system where they get good results. So was it a mistake by Villa now in hindsight? I know it's easy to make these assessments in hindsight, but when you look back, did they buy too many players? Did they spend too much money? Should they maybe have put more faith in the players that got them promoted?
Well, look, when we got promoted at Crystal Palace, we pretty much kept the nucleus of what we had, and we said we're going to go at it with what we're good at, which is, you know, defensively strong, counter-attacking football, and these are our principles. We want to stick with it. Fulham tried it a couple of years ago. They went up and blew all this money, and I know the manager there said afterwards that they did that wrong. Even the club admitted we shouldn't have done that. We should have stuck with what we had. I did catch you say at the start of the second half that Dean Smith spent 140 million, you know, and I was going to pull you up and say, well, did he really? Was it Dean Smith that spent it? I'd be surprised, you know. I could picture Dean Smith sitting in his office and, you know, one of these players walks in the door and he actually has to go, who's that? And that happens, believe it or not, in football, where like director football goes, oh, that's Samata, he's our new centre forward, and he's gone, who?
Right.
You know, and then all of a sudden he's scrambling because somebody gets some clips of this guy. And I know stories where that has actually happened in football before. I've seen that actually happen. So did he really spend it? Did he have much choice in the route the club were going down? Because a lot of these wealthy owners that own football clubs now, they don't want to hand it over to a manager or a director of football that they don't know. A lot of them come with their own directors of football that put their plan in place, and the manager has to deal with it. And Dean Smith's job basically is put out fires. But you can watch Villa today. They're very, very passive. Even in the last 10 minutes, there wasn't a whole lot in what they did. They never really pinned Chelsea in. You know, normally when you're 2-0 down at home, you can blame the crowd for this if you want, but you're 2-0 down, 2-1 down at home with 5 minutes to go, could take the shackles off and really pin Chelsea in. It never came, which just lets me know that psychologically they don't want to say they rolled over, but in a sense they kind of did. They just accepted the 2-1 defeat really, and at one point there Chelsea had 7, 8, 9, 10 passes in the corner, and no Villa player stuck a leg in or fouled or did anything. You know, they just kind of let we're 2-1 down, 10 minutes to go, I would accept this one and move on. And they're traits of a team that got relegated. You know, at least if they had a go and they just, you know, said, oh, I'm not having this really, I'm going to go nail someone here, win the ball back and really try and pin Chelsea in. And maybe we'll get lucky, maybe we'll get a penalty, we'll get a deflection or something will happen. It never came because they never asked the questions, and that's why I would worry for Villa. The only thing is there two worst teams, because Norwich are gone, is there two worst teams? Yeah. I think West Ham possibly might be a bit softer than Villa. I think that Watford don't look like they're going in a great, so I think it's 2 from those 3 really.
And Bournemouth maybe as well, could you throw in
there you go, man. I mean they look like right in trouble as well, but again, if they stay up, it won't be with anything they've done. It'll just be there'll be 2 worst teams in them that were potentially softer. But looking at Villa today, they look pretty soft, they look wishy-washy, they don't have any real dogs in their team, they don't have any real, don't use the term leaders, but you know, characters. You know, we're getting beat here, I'm not having this, and I'm just going to go and do something. Grealish had a little go at the end, but like, I mean, it just seemed to happen, and they let it happen, and it just fizzled out.
And as well, when you're in that situation, it's so important to have somebody who can score goals, and it just hasn't worked out for Villa like that. Wesley, as we know, is injured now, but he was struggling to find the net. They bring in Samata in January. I know he scored in his debut against Bournemouth, but he's gone now. He gets 5 games now without a goal. I know it's a short amount of time, and he could still come good in the last 8 games now of the season, but that's such an important thing, isn't it? Having a goal scorer in these last few matches.
But they don't create any chances. So while it's important having a goal scorer, you got to give them something. I mean, you know, Davis was on, and I know that they got Samata, but they, you know, your wide players were playing as fullbacks today. It's very, very hard to create chances. It's very, very hard to give these guys something to feed off. it's hit and miss stuff, because they're a nice, pretty team in their own half. You know, the midfield players like dropping and getting off the centre backs and making great little passes in their own half, where it counts is in the Chelsea's defensive third, and they just don't do that for me. They just have a lack of cutting edge, a lack of character, a lack of personality in that team, and that's what happens when you bring together 10, 12 players who weren't there last year. You're trying to settle everybody in, and I just think that they're, you know, obviously a lot of money around that football club, and it just seems to be a bit wishy-washy for me.
You mentioned, if we go back to the top four battle and the impact this Chelsea result will have, and I know you might have your doubts over Manchester United. They did have a good run before the break. The break probably came at the worst time for them. They just beaten City in the derby, which is a big result for them. But there's been a lot of talk about Paul Pogba coming back, and perhaps the link up between himself and Fernandes. Can they, you know, prove to be a good partnership for United? Or is Fernandes the kind of player that he's the star man and Pogba could perhaps upset what he was doing before the break?
I don't think so. I think those two players will find a way to work together. Scoring goals is a problem for Manchester United. I think Martial gets away with it for me. I think he's lazy, he's immobile, he's very disinterested for large portions of the game. Even the other night I was watching him, very static. There's not a whole lot of creativity in the full-back area. Aaron Wan-Bissaka's very good defender. Is he like Azpilicueta today, where he set up 2 goals, you know, causing all sorts of damage? And Marcos Alonso as well with his 25-30 crosses. I'm not sure Luke Shaw is either on the other side. Decent players, don't get me wrong, but is there enough creativity? There is enough creativity with Fernandes and Pogba, but is there enough people to get on the end of it, and is there enough people to score the goals that they're going to require? Because I always feel like United will concede goals. So is there enough, you know, for them to get 2 or 3 goals a game? I don't think they're that type of team, and they're not set up for 1-0 wins. So they kind of have a lot of attacking players, but I just don't see them getting 2-3 goals a game.
So it looks like, you know, the top 3 is sewn up: City, Liverpool, and Leicester City. You would have to say probably have that other spot sealed off. Although you never know, there's still there's a small gap between them and Chelsea. But if you were looking at it that way, like, who else can you see getting into the top 4 apart from Liverpool and City? Is it Chelsea definitely going to get?
I think Chelsea will sew up that 4th spot. But I think if there was a challenger to come for it, it'll probably come from Wolves. Yeah. You know, I think that's. Everyone's focusing on United, Spurs, Arsenal, you know, and there's a lot of like negativity as which one of them is going to get the 4th spot. I think it could be Wolves. If there's any team could put a run together, I think it's them, where they could put pressure on Chelsea. I don't think they've got enough to catch them, because I think Chelsea will win enough games and keep that cushion that they already have. But I know Man City have their problems with UEFA, so there could be a 5th spot available. I don't know. So if City do get thrown out of Europe, I mean, I think Wolves could get that 5th spot. And
they seem to be, Wolves are one of the more complete teams out of those teams. They've got really solid defence, good goalkeeper in Patricio, good midfield, and up front they got an array of talent, the likes of Jota, Jimenez of course, and Adama Traore.
A well-oiled machine. He has his principles, he has his way, how he wants to attack, how he wants to defend. And you could see straight away the game they played, they just picked it up straight away. You know, they're very well drilled. There's nothing probably left to chance, or nothing off the cuff for them. He's very well organised, very diligent, and I think he expects the same of his players. And to finish, just your general thoughts on what we've seen so far this weekend, the Premier League coming back. Like, I know it's tough not having the crowds there, and it's hard for the supporters who support their team right through the season not to be able to be there. Maybe the Bundesliga kind of set us up for it well. I think I find I'm getting used to it a bit more. Yeah. What's your own thoughts on what's gone? It has to finish, just from a financial point of view, and I don't think anyone really cares of how it finishes, because Liverpool are going to be champions, so it just needs to finish, and we all just need to just, you know, stop complaining and just July the 15th, it's less than a month, get the games out of the way and we start again next season. But I wouldn't look too much into this weekend, to be honest with you. You know, it is like first game of the season, and in my experience, first game of the season, it's very rarely 2 or 3 games in is usually the same team that's playing, or results, you know, pick up, you know, because players have had such a long time off. Some teams might have got their fitness regimes wrong and they might get to work on certain things. I don't know, but let's just all get behind it, get it over the line and start again next year.
Alright, so a convincing victory for Newcastle in the first game of the day, 3-0 win over Sheffield United. And as we go around the UK to Premier League matches, we always take a keen interest in the Irish, and we always take great pride when they grab a goal or they perform well. Unfortunately, today wasn't one of those days. It was a bad old day for John Egan and Enda Stevens.
Yeah, McGoldrick didn't make the squad. He obviously wasn't fit after the knock he got coming on sub the other night against Aston Villa, and then it didn't go well for John Egan. Obviously, the yellow card in the first half. It might have been a little bit harsh. It was a nothing incident. It wasn't like it was a foul or a kick. It was a row over a free kick that was awarded to Sheffield United. And he got involved with Joe Linton. The referee decided to give both of them yellow cards, but that was costly for him. In the second half, went up against Joe Linton. He probably got a little bit too tight to him. We probably need to hear what Damien Delaney or Gary Breen, the centre halves union, have to say about it. But initially, he was right up against some long boo forward from Newcastle player out of the penalty area. He got the first touch with his right leg around Joe Linton's body, but the ball broke off Joe Linton's body into his path, and it looked like he was going to get away from John Egan, but he held him probably too often. He had a couple of snatches at him, and the referee decided that he did foul him, and that proved to be crucial in the game, because then the Stevens made a bad error from Matt Ritchie's attempted pass that Enda Stevens tried to cut it out, and it went between his legs as he tried to kick it with his right foot into the path of the pass went into the path of Saint-Maximin. He scored, and the opening goal was crucial in this game for two teams that don't score a lot of goals. Newcastle 25 before today, and Sheffield United just 30. So the opening goal was very important, and obviously with the 10 men, Newcastle went on from there to win 3-0.
Sheffield United could have gone fifth with a win. They now go to Old Trafford to play Manchester United on Wednesday. That's a huge game for them if they are to somehow squeeze into a Champions League place. They've been the story. Newcastle often get forgotten about in the way they're nicely in mid-table now, but they got their goals, and three attacking players got their goals for once. Joe Linton, first in quite a while, first at St James's Park for him in the Premier League. Steve Bruce getting enough credit?
Probably not. You know, he's got a lot of criticism, I think, from Newcastle fans who are probably over expectant. They don't always realise how ordinary many of their players are, and I think Steve Bruce has extracted almost the maximum from them. I'm not sure that Joe Linton was his choice. It was a lot of money spent on him, 40 million. Saint-Maximin, they're getting good value from him. Another goal today, that's 3. It took him a while to get going. He didn't score until December, I think, was his first goal. Joe Linton's last goal we saw it against Spurs early in the season, September maybe, was it?
August, I think, yeah.
Was it? They won 1-0 away at Spurs. And so he gets a goal there. But his all-round game today I thought was quite good. And the three of them together, Almiron played well. Matt Ritchie got a good goal, good finish, good strike. But Sheffield United were off today. Newcastle were better. 38 points, that will be safe. I think 37 has been enough for the majority of the last 10 seasons. So 38 will be enough for them this season to see them safe. And so now they can be looking, can we get a little bit further up the table rather than looking down? A good few seasons it's been looking down, looking behind for them. Are we going to be safe? So I think Steve Bruce done a good job.
A lot of people have watched a lot of football this weekend. Every match on the television, and of course tuning in on Off the Ball on the radio. I'm sure taking a break on just tune in on the app and you can
go for a drive.
Exactly.
Us.
That's it. It keeps everybody happy. Is the only thing we could advise. From what I know from talking to you around it, you haven't overly enjoyed the behind closed doors experience. Just in terms of performances, though, what stood out over the weekend?
Well, I think Newcastle's result has been a bit of a standout. I think Arsenal's 2 defeats are quite shocking, even by Arsenal standards. The fact that they blew the Brighton match, haven't gone ahead. I suppose Wolves coming back, you know, and not so much coming back, but finding a way to win that game, get 2 goals when it looked like it was petering out into nothing against West Ham, just confirms their season so far that it's not a flash in the pan.
Who wins a 100-metre sprint between Adama Traore and Alan Saint-Maximin?
Well, I think Traore's been doing it for a lot longer. I mean, I can remember him playing with Middlesbrough a few years back, playing in the front position and running like a very fast hare, but not running in any great direction, running like a hare that was trying to avoid the hounds. But now there seems to be a lot more logic to what he does when he's on the ball, a lot more effectiveness, and he is really a key player for them. Come on and change the game yesterday. But some good performances, but some very mediocre performances so far. And I think the players will need a game or two to get back into the rhythm of their combination plays, of their understanding between each other and the best of their touch.
What about Friday night, Manchester United against Tottenham? There's obviously a huge amount of criticism from Roy Keane in particular for Harry Maguire and David De Gea for the first goal, but then a lot of praise for what Paul Pogba did in the second half and just how good that combination of himself and Bruno Fernandes could be. With Kenny Cunningham on yesterday saying he thinks that those two as a midfield could potentially spark United into being real title challengers next season.
Well, I think that was the best match of the weekend in terms of technical ability, tactical play, change of fortunes, Spurs getting a goal, looking dangerous on the break, Manchester United dominating possession, missing a couple of opportunities, but finding it hard to break through, and Spurs sat back in the second half, having got the lead goal. They probably sat back too far. Pogba come on and had an impact, just as you talked about Traore there, had a real impact in the game. Seemed to be a spark already, and I heard Bruno Fernandes talking after the match about that. They've hit it off, they work together in training, they've been in the same small working group, he said, and that's clever by Solskjaer to do that, to ensure they're trying to develop an understanding. But isn't it sad that we're talking about Pogba, but he's not made an impact this season, that he's played so little, and all that controversy, is he injured, is he not injured, is it a sore ankle, is he getting better, is he going to be back, is he going to be fit, is he going to leave? It's always
hard to get carried away in half an hour.
Yeah, it is, but you know, he's a good player, Pogba. He's not consistent enough. He needs to do it for a long period, he needs to do it game after game, he needs to be a match winner more often. But Fernandes has showed he's a player, and he is a better player than what Manchester United have been using for the last couple of seasons in those attacking positions from midfield. He can see a pass, he can play a pass, and he can shoot. He's taken penalties. Most of his goals have been set pieces so far, but he's had a real impact since he's come along, and there's a lot of potential there in that pairing. Another
quiet weekend as well in the life of Roy Keane. He'd be swinging punches in the United dressing room at half time, leaving the two lads behind around the bus home. Keith Andrews, the bullshitter.
Look, you know, Roy has been a manager and he knows what it's like. He's been a player, he knows what that's like. Now he's a pundit, and he's doing his punditry in his own way. I think it certainly gives headlines, but I didn't think his analysis at half time was particularly incisive or logical. I mean, yes, Luke Shaw should have done a bit better in that moment, and Maguire could have done a bit better, and certainly it was a mistake by De Gea, but it kind of overlooked how brilliant the play was by Bergwijn to come up with that, and also that over a period of time Maguire has been a good player for Manchester United this season. Luke Shaw has had a fairly decent season also, and De Gea for years has been a very good goalkeeper for United. Is he overrated, as Roy says? I don't think he's overrated. I think he's let in some soft goals this season, and as we said in commentary today, he's going to be under pressure by Dean Henderson. But talking about, you know, throwing punches at half time in the dressing room and so on, I don't think that does Roy any favours. It grabs a headline if the media want to use him for headlines and for sensationalism at half time and after matches, so be it. But would it be attractive to clubs to take him on as a manager if they thought that's how he actually reacts at half time to someone making mistakes? I don't think so. But, you know, look, everyone has their own style, everyone does it their own way, and, you know, Roy's way is a bit different.
Yeah. Well, you've been in the dressing room with him. Did you ever see him swinging punches,
I was
raising
the manager,
his voice? I understand that.
I was the manager,
he
was the player.
That, but even as a player...
No, we didn't have, you know, look, I was fortunate enough to manage Roy for a few matches with Ireland when he eventually came back, and his behaviour and outlook and the influence was excellent. You know, around the team, in the training, on the pitch. I mean, he wasn't at his best at that time. He was still suffering from some of the previous injuries he's had, but he still had an impact. But it was only a short part in his career, and we got on very well. He got on very well with all the staff and all the players during that period, and you know, he was a great servant of Ireland when he played in the matches. He had a great impact. He's one of our greatest ever players. And he's moved on now with his career, and he, you know, having probably said he never wanted to be a pundit, he is a pundit, and he attracts a lot of attention, and he sees the game very clearly, and he sees the game very well too.
Yeah, you've done all right. You haven't got the tongue lashing just yet.
I'm not sure. I never read the. I haven't read the books. Maybe it's in there in the books.
I think you did. Okay. It was McIntyre was the problem, wasn't that it?
With me.
Let's not go there again. We've already done that.
I never read any of them. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me at all.
All right, Brian. Good stuff. We're going to be back Wednesday night. Liverpool against Crystal Palace. Potentially the title decider for Liverpool. So we'll talk to you then.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
OTB's Mt Rushmore, 32 counties, one county representative choosing their sporting Mt Rushmore.
I'm going to be very unpopular. Thank God we can't go too far. I might have to go back into lockdown.
The bad news is they're all from Waterford.
Join the debate across all our social channels at Off the Ball.
You just need to put a health warning with it.
And catch the live decision making over the next few months on OTB AM, live every weekday at 7:30 AM on OTB Sports Radio.
OTB AM.
Declan Bogue and Colm Bradley are going to do Fermanagh's Mt Rushmore this morning. If you've got any thoughts on that, that's coming your way at around about 9:10. We're going to talk rugby with Alan Quinlan a little bit later on as well. If you have any questions for him, you can WhatsApp us. 087 180 180 is the number. It's 8:02 here this morning on OTB AM. It's Gilroy and Dave McIntyre with you all the way through until 10. Dave, did you watch every single football match? Did you sit there and kind of like, oh my God, my eyes are square at the end of football? Or are you slowly getting back into the rhythm of plonking yourself in front of the TV and watching a lot of football?
I've watched a lot of sport. I watched 2.5 full games. I watched half the Villa Sheffield United game. I saw all of Tottenham Manchester United, and I watched all of the Merseyside derby last night. And then I've obviously gone through all the highlights and seen the goals and the various talking points from the other games. And I've watched probably more golf than I have in the last couple of years in terms of regular PGA Tour events. So I have managed to get plenty of time on the couch to do my best to catch up and gorge myself on what was on offer. So yeah, I've quickly eased myself back in. It's been enjoyable.
I haven't seen any of the Sunday golf actually, so I don't know what the impact of not having crowds on Sunday when there's money on the line. It did seem to me like the first few days of the golf, it didn't really matter that there were no fans there because you're kind of not used to huge crowds on a Thursday or a Friday. And sometimes on a Saturday the crowds are grand, but they don't seem to matter in golf as much.
Yeah, I think the bigger the tournament it is, the more the crowds play a role. Like the Masters, the Ryder Cup, the Open Championship, having the crowds there are huge. And hearing roars from around the golf course on the back nine on the Sunday when a player is standing over a shot maybe in the middle of a fairway, that adds to the TV side of it immensely during those bigger tournaments. But we've been watching regular PGA Tour, regular European Tour events for years where there were virtually no spectators. Look at any of the events in the Middle East on the Thursday and the Friday on the European Tour. There's been nobody there watching them, bar a smattering of tourists or expats that might be standing around the back of the green. So in terms of what we've watched last week at the Colonial and this week at the Heritage in Hilton Head, it doesn't make a blind bit of difference. It hasn't taken away from my enjoyment at all. And if anything, it kind of adds to the intrigue. I don't know how much of you saw of the event in Texas last weekend, but there were 3 or 4 missed putts from inside 4 feet, and the eerie silence when the golfer is staring at the hole and can't believe the putt has gone in. Normally you would obviously have a huge groan or some encouraging shouts from the crowd, but I think it actually added to the suspense and the tension at times. So it's a two-way street in some regards in the lesser events, But like football, there are moments where you desperately do miss the crowds in and around the greens and the fairways. So that will change hopefully soon enough. I think there's only 4 events down to go crowdless. Now, whether that changes given the situation in the States and the rather worrying figures emerging from many of the states in the US, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, look, who knows what the hell they're going to do. I think that is definitely a movable feast. As it stands, the plan is to have fans at the Ryder Cup. There clearly won't be any Europeans. I mean, I suppose there's lots of Europeans who probably live in America who might be able to go. If the Ryder Cup couldn't have fans, are you in the kick it back a year and like, what's the big deal camp? Or are you in the we need a Ryder Cup this year for the sense of normality?
Yeah, I would probably kick it back a year. I'm a huge fan of the Ryder Cup, and I would have it up there with the Masters as in the top 2 or 3 golf events. The fact that it's every 2 years makes it extra special, but the crowds at the Ryder Cup are of vital importance to me. And I would be happy enough to wait 3 years for a Ryder Cup if it meant that we could have a full golf course and full galleries, full grandstands. Look, it wouldn't be unprecedented. They obviously kicked it back a year after 9/11. And the Ryder Cup that was always played in even odd years before that. So we could just go back to odd years, then you bump the Presidents' Cup back a year. It's not the end of the world. If it came to a decision as to whether to go to Whistling Straits this September with no fans, I would be an advocate for postponing it. But I'm sure there are plenty that would have an opinion contrary to that. Any Ryder Cup is better than no Ryder Cup, some people might say. So either way, if it's played this year, I'll be reasonably happy. But yeah, if the decision was to push it back a year, I would go down that road. We
were speaking about this around about 7:30 this morning when we started the show. But in terms of the quality of the football being impacted by the absence of fans, I think it's quite clear that the fans have a really important role to play in how we interpret and watch and listen to football matches. That actually, one of the things that struck me was that one of the benefits of multiple screens when you're watching football is that it's grand because you can be on your phone, and when the crowd noise alerts you to something, as opposed to the commentators. I realise that, Dave, you know, as a commentator, you might take some offence to this, but that actually it's the crowd going, "Wow!" You look up, you're like, "Okay, grand, I need to see this now." That's gone. So I think a lot of people are going to be watching a lot more football, slightly more intently, and you know, some of the football that we're watching at the moment isn't going to be of the very highest quality because these players haven't played a lot of games just recently.
So are you saying the superimposed, glued-in crowd noise doesn't get you to look up from your phone when there's a slightly delayed ooh and ah because a ball is hit the post or something?
Well, it's like, what happened there? I've got to rewind it now, and it's like...
Yeah, no, you're right. I have to say, watching the games with the canned noise, it hasn't detracted from my viewing experience in a massive way, to be perfectly honest with you. I've been well able to sit through it. I have flicked over to the other Sky channel to see and get a feel for what it's like to watch the game, and getting that almost training ground sound and acoustics from the stadium, and I just can't live with that. I can't watch that. I watched a couple of the Bundesliga games in that manner and I had to turn it off. It's just like watching a few lads with a few bibs on running around the park. Even though the standard of the football is very good, I really struggle to watch that from a viewing point of view. So I've always had it on this week with the crowd noise. I still enjoyed a couple of the games that had some to offer and didn't enjoy last night's game. But you're right, rustiness is another thing as well, because I think Liverpool, they do thrive on the big crowd and the big event and the way that they play and approach the game with this press and their all-out energy game that Jurgen Klopp has perfected with them so well. But at the same time, they haven't played in 3 months. And they weren't in the best of form before the break either. I think they'd lost 4 of their 6 games before the COVID-19 crisis hit. So I'd give Liverpool a pass, to be honest, on last night. I think winning the title in front of the empty stands at Anfield will be an eerie experience, no matter how Liverpool players and management and fans might dress it up. When you've waited this long for the title, for it to arrive in this fashion, I think it's going to take away from it from a little, but 30 years is still 30 years. And obviously the joy of ending that 30 years and drawing level with Manchester United on 20 titles is something they'll relish. But I have a feeling if they came back and won it in front of a packed Anfield in a year's time, it would be a much better feeling, and it might even mean something more.
It's hard to know, right? Because like for the players, celebrating with the fans is obviously hugely important, and that open top bus ride whenever it happens is something that you hear stories about for years and years and years and years to come. At the same time, like, they know they are the best team in the league because they were so far ahead. They were picking up points at a record-breaking pace. They were on track to break all sorts of records that they themselves had set. So Ken Early's making the argument today that they're the greatest Liverpool team of all time, and that's obviously very high praise. I don't think it's going to matter to them too much. Once they get the season ratified and get the medal, then it'll feel to them like they won the league.
Yeah, in the short to medium term, I'm sure there will be a feeling of immense personal satisfaction amongst those players and amongst any member of staff that has played a role in getting them to where they are, because they've been phenomenal. I absolutely love watching this Liverpool team. They never really let you down. They deliver a level of performance that will always have you on the edge of your seat. And I've already referenced the manner in which they play. It's so watchable. And they seem to be a really good bunch of players as well. They've got a very likeable manager also. And then you just throw in the stadium and all the history that is associated with Liverpool. I've watched a couple of documentaries in Liverpool over the last week or two, actually. The one on Kenny Dalglish is an incredible watch. But I think that is the medium to long-term feel that the players will get. In the short term, they're going to miss out on so much. My mind is drawn back to the Etihad Stadium in 2012. I was actually at the Stadium of Light in Sunderland the day that United beat Sunderland. And it looked for a few seconds like they were going to win the title. And we know the scenes that took place in the Etihad Stadium with those late goals from Dzeko and Balotelli and Aguero. How could you compare what the City fans experienced that day to what the Liverpool fans sitting at home on their TV will watch when they're seeing Liverpool possibly win it at the Etihad?
Fair enough. But that's the single day where one of the most remarkable things ever happens from a City perspective. It's like a complete bizarre sequence of events. And fair enough. You can't compare We Are City, Super City with what happens over the course of the season. But if you're a Liverpool fan, you've had this sense of we are the best team in Europe for 12 to 18 months now. It's like, what do you want? The one-off, short, amazing burst, or do you want this long-term sense of we are superstars? I guess the Liverpool fans can let us know this morning. 0879 180 180 is the number. Gary Breen is with us. Gary, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning, guys. I'm very well, thank you.
We've started there talking about Liverpool and how, it's a terrible situation they find themselves in. How much are they going to celebrate winning this league title when they eventually do? And my heart bleeds for them as a Villa fan who's watching my team collapse at the moment. Is it going to be in any way diminished for the players, the fact that they win the league the way they're about to win the league over the next couple of weeks?
I don't think so. Bearing in mind what an achievement it is and how long it's been for the team, of course you'd want to celebrate. And if you think about the parades that Liverpool have when they've won that Champions League and stuff, and you feel that, I know Champions League is considered the premier or the biggest title in Europe, but it's a special relationship, the league title for Liverpool, and the fact that they've never won the Premier League is incredible. So it would have been unique. So to be robbed of that opportunity is just one of the things that has happened. It's a shame, but those players will take immense pride, and they should do, because they've been fantastic.
Can we get your impression of the football over the course of the weekend? And maybe we should start with the Merseyside derby. Maybe the best part about this from an Irish perspective is Seamus Coleman and the quality of the football that he put in after a long break. It was great to see, and it was great to see that he's still capable of that.
Absolutely. He looked invigorated, didn't he? And he was everything about his tenacious best, obviously, up against someone like Mane. It's a difficult challenge. But no surprise, really, when I don't know him personally, but in terms of his character, it shines through in every time he plays football, whether he plays particularly well or not. But it was an impressive performance by Everton, notably defensively, because I'd done their last game just before the lockdown away to Chelsea. And Ancelotti adopts his kind of 4-4-2 system that is quite fluid in terms that he can go to a back three in and out of possession. But in terms of their depth, how they manage the space in and around midfield between both the units, they did it so well against Liverpool. Against Chelsea, they were dreadful. Lost 4-0 on the day. Chelsea just picking holes between the lines consistently and exposing them. So you're worried about them. But obviously, we look at Ancelotti. This is a system that served him well. We've seen him do something similar at Napoli. Of course, he got a great result against Liverpool there. But I just think we saw his quality as a manager. We have seen now their players believing in him, because he obviously has that aura about him in terms of being an elite level manager. And I think it does bode well for Everton. I think there's a lot of work to be done, but nevertheless, that was an impressive performance.
The Ancelotti thing is actually interesting. I wonder if you're a new manager in a club and you have this weird period of time where you've not got very much to do, you don't have that much access to the players, but you do have access to all of their data and all of their most recent performances, that it's kind of a low pressure mid-season and next season's pre-season break as well. Are there some managers who are experienced enough to be able to use that to their advantage?
Yeah, well, you would hope so. In terms of what they have, the kind of different methods of coaching your players, not necessarily just being on the training ground, the fact that you're able to give them all the analysis on their laptops, iPads, whatever they're using, is a great help. It really is. And if I think about going back coaching now, if I had that tour and a manager was showing me it, because there's different ways you learn as a player, different ways you learn as a child. You might learn visually, verbally, whatever, been having to shown practically. So to be able to cover all those bases is brilliant. And I do believe that looking at them, because if you think about Liverpool, obviously their strength is the spacing behind. I didn't think they had that kind of threat so much without Salah. I think Minamino looks to come short, looks to link at 10. So they don't have that searing pace in behind. But nevertheless, Everton defended reasonably deep, trusted their midfield to come back and close that space. So you can see the work that's being done with Ancelotti. And I do believe you see the difference now in terms of his ability. I think certainly the supporters, we're not seeing them yet, will buy into Ancelotti. I think he'll have a lot of support in a way that maybe Benitez has when he went to Newcastle. Not necessarily bearing in mind that Brucey is probably has got a better points return, better win percentage than Benitez has. But the perception is so important in football. And if you suddenly got a manager like Benitez who's come from Real Madrid to Newcastle, or Ancelotti is just a serial winner with all the elite level clubs in Europe, then your fans are buying into it straight away.
What level of ambition should Everton have, do you think, Gary? I mean, obviously, this season is going to be this season, but for next year?
Yeah. Well, I think the ambition is always there. And the big problem is how realistic it is, because if you think about the money that the new owner initially ploughed into the club, Marcel Brands comes over from PSV as director of football, does a great job there. So you're thinking, okay, listen, the structure's right. Because so many times with that money, they just wasted so much of that money on buys that you just thought, really? You want to pay that much for that player? And it started to look a little for me like when QPR had a lot of money initially and were just throwing it about on players who weren't really worthy of it. So I think they have to be clever. And I know there's a lot of talk about getting a new stadium, so that will hit hard. And of course, when Liverpool have been so successful in your city, it is a difficult one. But I think with the likes of Ancelotti, I think they will encourage players to come there that they possibly wouldn't have done before. I think the Premier League's a massive ball anyway. And now Ancelotti's there, perhaps they are able to slowly but surely get players that they need to try and bridge that gap. But it won't be easy.
Gary, do you think the way in which Seamus Coleman was playing last night, and in fairness to Seamus Coleman, the break hasn't exactly affected his form because he was playing like that in the few weeks before the suspension in play, that this debate over his position in the Ireland team and the talk around Matt Doherty and everything, when you see him playing like that for Everton and playing as well as he has at any stage before his injury, that there's no real argument as to where Seamus Coleman stands now, that debate is done.
Well, Dave, to be honest, I wasn't surprised that he'd able. I never was one of those who felt that he was done as such. And I think we're very quick when players get to a certain age to think that, listen, they can't get it back. He certainly has benefited from the break and to recharge his batteries. But it was interesting because I talked about how good they were and how defensively set up and well organised they were. But having Seamus on the right-hand side, if you remember back to the games just before the lockdown, Sir Davies playing right back against Arsenal, got exposed by Aubameyang making those out-to-in runs and being caught out, costing him the game essentially, and likewise struggled against Chelsea. But Seamus gives you all that experience, that know-how. So it's great. We in an ideal world, I know the debate will always be there. It was noticeable to see him kind of narrowing up as a third centre-half quite a lot. I think there's a lot of talk about could you shoehorn both Doherty and Seamus into that type of system. I'm not sure Stephen Kenny will look to do that. But nevertheless, you just want all your players playing well, and whoever gets the shirt gets it deservedly.
So you're not sure Stephen Kenny will do that, but it'd be good to see that, wouldn't it? I understand that the sequence of games probably isn't going to allow for a lot of experimentation from an Ireland perspective, but at some point down the line, these players, it'd be great to see them given an opportunity to play in the same team and somehow work out a way of both playing well together at the same time.
Yeah, listen, and I'm sure Stephen Kenny and his coaching staff will be so thorough. There's something I've noticed about them that they will look at every potential lineup, tactical shape to suit the team. But I've never been one, Joe, I've said this to you before, I've never been one about just shoehorning your best players in. If it is that simple, that black and white, that there's a right back slot available and it's between Seamus and Matt Doherty, then you just pick them. You don't suddenly start thinking, well, listen, can we play him left back and can we get him? It just doesn't work that way, in my opinion.
Okay, fair enough. Let's move on to some of the other football over the course of the weekend. Some players seem to have adapted very well and come back very close to top form. A lot of other players are very rusty as well. Yeah. Is that just normal after a break like this, and we're going to be unaware of which players are in good form until maybe 2 or 3 weeks down the line where you're like, okay, now you're getting back to where you're supposed to be?
Well, I think we will certainly be there, but I think even the managers, Joe, have been, in terms of the selections, at times have been strange. They probably got their data through, who's looking sharp, who's impressed in training, because there's been a lot of team selections where you thought, really, he's not playing? That's a surprise. But I think, I think you're right. I think usually when you have the off-season break, invariably it's these elite level players now are probably only getting 3 or 4 weeks at most, considering that they'll have their responsibilities for the national team to play those games. So suddenly to have one as long as it has been is a unique experience. All the sports scientists will be having to work it out. But I think you're right. I think certain players have come back quicker. I've always made a point that centre-halves in particular take a bit longer, and not necessarily just for fitness, but I think about timing. I think John Egan, I said that in his first game back when it looked like Keane Davies was giving him a bit of problems at centre-half, wasn't picking up the flight. Well, again, we seen it yesterday, although that's never a book in the first one. It's a nonsense that he gets sent off. So I think that can happen. Even talking about your team there, Joe, Villa, that was the game that I really focused on watching live over the weekend. That was the main one for me, because I wanted to see what Chelsea were like. I thought they were in a driving seat for the Champions League positions. Could they take advantage of the fact that United and Tottenham had effectively dropped 2 points themselves and really make it count? And I was so impressed with them. There were a few signs that they had the same problems, that they were dominating games, but they couldn't make the breakthrough. And I think that's the reason why you're going to see the likes of Ziyech come in, Werner, who are guys who will come from in to get strikes on goal all the time. But if you add that to the quality that they have, I know the likes of Willian Pedro will leave in most likelihood. But nevertheless, Pulisic, Mount was so impressive. But for you, Joe, I think it'd be a frustration for you, because it's the second game for Villa. You'd expected them to have looked a bit stronger. But I just looked at them defensively, and it's a real concern. Yet they look like they have a good shape in terms of having that back four there, that narrow midfield five. But the space that they gave out wide to Chelsea was incredible. And it was noticeable to actually watch that, because I was looking at Conor Horan and I was thinking, the amount of times him as an advanced left side centre midfielder has to go back into left back and make sliding tackles. And I was looking at it thinking, what is happening here? You've got a narrow midfield, you've got a narrow back four, and yet Chelsea, time and time again, were getting in and spreading out. And I think it's a real concern, because Jack Grealish is obviously your best player, but out of possession, they are so vulnerable down that left-hand side. And so often, Connor's having to run back with sliding tackles. There's a couple of occasions in the first half, he gets in that left-back position, he's squared up by Mount. He doesn't want to be there. I think top-class centre-halves don't want to be in those areas against someone as tricky as Mason Mount, but he was there continuing. I think Villa having 2 home games and being lucky to have got that point, it doesn't look good for them. No,
I think they're screwed at this stage. Just to talk about Chelsea, because you said there you'd done the Everton game where they picked Everton apart with a similar sense of them being able to find pockets of space. They completely dominated the game against Villa and should have been. It should have been a much bigger victory for them. Are they a team who feel like they're poised for a breakout to be proper contenders again? And I'm not just talking about, finishing fourth and being a good Champions League team like, or Champions League qualifying team like the late era Wenger Arsenal, but actually someone who could go toe to toe with City and with Liverpool over the next couple of seasons.
Well, I do. In terms of them going forward, I think they're good signings. Ziyech, I've seen so much of him at Ajax. I know what he'll look to do on that right-hand side. He'll come in with his left foot and will get goals. No doubt about it. He'll get goals from distance. And at times, Chelsea have found deep line defence is difficult to break down. If you've got someone now who's got that range, gets in around the penalty area and gets sight of goal, he'll punish him. Werner, we know about his pace getting in behind, whether or not the opposition give him that and whether or not he can play in tight areas remains to be seen. But they're good additions, they really are. But the problem remains, and this is the one thing that I would say in terms of that question, Jer, can they compete at the top defensively? No. I don't believe they can, because when you think about those title-winning Chelsea teams, defensively so strong, centre-half so good, and I'm looking at those centre-halves yesterday, Christensen, who I like as a centre-half, young, quick, looks after the ball, but they don't have the presence. Rudiger will always have a mistake in him, in my opinion, but they certainly don't have the presence that Chelsea centre-backs have had in the past. And you may counter that, and I'm sure many people will, and say, well, listen, Antonio Conte won the Premier League with Cahill, Luiz, Azpilicueta as centre-half. Yeah, they did. But the reason they did is because out of possession, that back three very quickly became a back seven. They got N'Golo Conte screening midfield. You won't get at them. But that was good. And I think that bodes well in terms of protecting those centre-halves who I don't think are of elite level quality, was the fact that N'Golo Conte reverted back to the position we like to see him best in. And that's patrolling deep midfield and just allowing the likes of the other midfielders, Mount, and to play forward Pulisic. I'd just like to see N'Golo Conte there. But in answer to your question, defensively is the reason they won't be able to challenge Liverpool and City at the top.
In terms of the top four this season, go on, sorry, Dave.
Sorry, Jared. Do you think, Gary, they actually have the personnel, and it's just a question of how they're being coached, that Frank Lampard over the summer can get them in a position where if he puts the likes of Kovacic and Conte in front of that back four or that back three, that they will improve, or they actually need to go out and sign a couple of centre halves that have real presence and maybe have played at a Champions League level? Because we saw in the group stages of this season's Champions League, Chelsea were exposed routinely by pretty average sides such as Valencia, for example.
Yeah, well, listen, in terms of tactically, I think in terms of being as expansive as Frank Lampard will want his teams to be, I don't think personnel-wise they have good enough centre-halves. You're right. And if you think about Liverpool, obviously Van Dijk, but the biggest example of if you take an elite-level centre-half out of your team is Manchester City. Take Laporte out of there and their title challenge just crumbled, didn't it? And we're talking about some of the best players in the Premier League, how good they are in and out of possession. But if you ain't got a centre-half who's just in the right area consistently well, then you can't do it. And I look at that and I know they're going to look at situations now where they're talking about potentially getting a left-back in. Chilwell's been talked about, but he ain't going to solve that problem at centre-half, because Chilwell's, if he plays to type like we saw yesterday with an incredible goal against Watford, he'll want to be in high advanced areas and creating width in that pitch, as a modern-day fullback will be. And because of that, because of the way the modern-day fullbacks play, that they are high advanced areas, there's a massive emphasis on your centre-half to be able to cope with space, but able to just repel the danger and set up another attack. And I just don't trust any of those centre-halves, whether or not it's Christensen, Rudiger, Kurt Zouma. I don't trust any of them to do that.
They're 5 points clear of Manchester United at the moment, as things stand. They're on 51 points and Man United are on 46. What did you make of United's performance on Friday night against Spurs and the situation that they find themselves in, where it looks like they're getting to a point where they have a plan, they just haven't picked their best central midfield together yet? Obviously Pogba's coming back from injury, so where are they? What's the truth about Manchester United at the moment?
Well, listen, that's the thing, Jer. What is the truth? What is their best central midfield pairing or three players in there? Because on paper, yes, it's Pogba, go in there, of course, and we saw the difference he made when he came out on that second half, and the link-up play. I think Bruno Fernandes looks like a brilliant signing. I have not seen him live yet, but I was so impressed with him. He can take the ball in tight situations. He's able to get his head up, work it, to get his strike on goal, can play lovely passes in and around, and gives them real composure in that midfield area. So then you think, OK, we'll add Pogba and his skill set in there as well. And you're talking about two quality midfielders. But the big question, and it always will be this question, is not about his ability, Pogba, because I don't think anyone can question that. It's his consistency. It's his actual application as such. And I'm not saying that he's not got his mind right. It's just that when you think about playing centre midfield for Manchester United, it's not necessarily about what skills you have. It's how you influence the game. Now, whether or not you're a Roy Keane and you control it, or a Paul Scholes and you control it, that's what it's about, how often you play and dominate games. Not necessarily about, are you able to flick balls over your head and control it, and that brilliant pass that we saw, that kind of side foot slice pass out to the wing that he done in the second half, Paul. But we know about his skill set, but it's whether or not he can consistently do that, and whether or not the failings in his game, i.e. staying with runners, looking after the opposition defensively, whether or not they will be exposed. But I can understand, I know this is going to be a big swell now for people saying, listen, when Pogba comes back, he's going to be sharp with Fernandez and then McTominay, Fred, whoever's at the base. It does look like they've got some real quality. And it does. It does on paper. But it remains to be seen whether or not it has the consistency to show that quality.
Do you think, Gary, that the presence of Bruno Fernandes, I'm asking you to jump inside the mind of Paul Pogba now, which I know is no easy feat, but that when he sees someone like him in the team with him, that it emboldens him and gives him a little more sense that he wants to be part of this because he can see a real attacking picture in the team, whereas before an awful lot of the attacking responsibility probably he felt was on his shoulders? Or does he see someone that is taking the limelight from him? It looks to me like Bruno Fernandes is already the leader in this team, and that might be something that will impinge on the mindset of Paul Pogba.
Yeah, well, my hope would be, Dave, that his reaction will be like, okay, well, I'm going to try and stamp and show you how good I am and to be the top man. Not in a selfish way, but just to say, listen, I'm going to really influence it. You're setting the standard consistently, and he has done, Bruno, in terms of since he's come in. He's been so impressive. And he has made a difference. You think about the impact he's probably having on Pogba, but look at the impact he's having on the rest of the team. The fact that they're giving him balls in tight situations, that they're trusting him, making runs. I mean, that little reverse pass into Martial in and around the box, that link play was so good. Eric Dyer gets back to make a sliding tackle to stop what looked a certain goal. But even moments like that as an opposition defender, midfielder would worry you because you're thinking, listen, I'm going to close him down, try and flood him as quick as I can. But he can see you coming. He can play reverse passes. He can play blind. He does look a very good footballer. But that would be my hope, Dave, in terms of Pogba, that his reaction is, oh, brilliant. Listen, this is great. We've got another good player in the building. This bodes well. Will it end up like that? We just don't know.
Obviously, Roy Keane made headlines for his...
Makes headlines every time he speaks.
Yeah.
He's a headline grabber. He's box office. He could tell us the weather and it would be the headline.
He was right, though, about De Gea, wasn't he? And Maguire?
Listen, in terms of the mistakes they've made, but I don't know, to be perfectly honest, I don't know if it's right to be saying, you're going to start swinging punches. Listen, people watching football now is inclusive. I just don't know. I don't know about that. But having said that, at times I think Roy's very clever. He knows how people buy into what he is like as a pundit as such. But I didn't think I was looking in his eyes there, and I could genuinely tell you now that was sheer anger. He was furious with those players. You could tell, because I think sometimes there's a little bit of a wry smile, a little bit of a giggle after these big comments that he makes. There was none of that there. He was seething, and you could see it as soon as Kelly went to him to ask the questions. You could just see he was bullying already, and Patrice was just laughing as such. But yeah, listen, you don't need Roy to come out with massive statements like that to tell us that De Gea has been poor. And the worry for United people, bearing in mind that he's been a saviour for 3 or 4 seasons, De Gea, is that this run of poor form is really dragging on now. It's probably over a season now, isn't it, where he's been making these type of mistakes. On Maguire, listen, if you look at Maguire, and I have seen him since he was a young player at Sheffield United, coaching against him with Peterborough, you always felt you can get at him in terms of that. But yet, every time he made that step up, initially goes to Hull, then he goes to Leicester, and you can't get at him. And he goes to Manchester United, and you go to England as well, internationally, you think you can get at him. But very, very rarely can you. But that was the moment that you do see the weakness, that because of his frame, he's not the quickest. He finds it very difficult to move his feet when he's caught square on. But the reason why he's got to the level is that he doesn't normally get himself into those situations. But he doesn't have the recovery pace of a Van Dijk. He doesn't have the recovery pace of most centre-halves who are quite mobile now. He's a throwback, isn't he, in terms of his physicality. But I still think he's been a brilliant signing for Manchester United. And those type of situations where he does look so cumbersome, so vulnerable, they are few and far between.
There's no chance of... Go on.
Sorry, Ger. I've a couple of questions on what we were saying about David De Gea. Roy said that he was an overrated goalkeeper, and given that he has been arguably the best goalkeeper in the world at a point, maybe about 2 years ago, and people were talking about him as being the best goalkeeper in the Premier League, it seems like a little bit of a farcical argument. But no goalkeeper in the division has made more errors that have led to goals the last 12 months than David De Gea. And you do feel there is a bad mistake in him on an almost game-to-game basis. He's still referred to as a world-class goalkeeper. So on that count, wasn't Roy right? He is very much an overrated player at the moment.
Oh, he's not living up to that billing that you've just given there in terms of, and he's certainly not living up to the form that we've seen in previous seasons where he was single-handedly keeping the opposition out. You think about the last time that he played against Tottenham, I think he made 11 saves in that massive win for Solskjaer against Pochettino, which looked at the time a defining moment in terms of getting the job. For that second half, I think he made 11 saves. It was nonsense how good he was. But there's no doubt, and I think when you think about Manchester United players, certainly in the generation that I played against, where you never really talked about confidence with them because they were just steely characters. They just churn out the wins week in, week out. But I think he has been massively effective with confidence. This is a goalkeeper that's at times getting booed by his own national team whenever he's in goal. They're not taking to him, the Spanish fans, and then suddenly his form's not particularly good for United. And you add to that the fact that there's a young, really impressive goalkeeper on loan from Manchester United at Sheffield United, Henderson, just putting pressure on him. I think previously there was no pressure coming from within the building, was there, in terms of the backups, because you never felt that, even though they're national team goalkeepers as well, you never felt they were really going to challenge it, partly because of the form that De Gea was in. But now that's all changed. I think there's a big decision to make, and certainly he's going to have to show a lot of character, De Gea, because this is not at the level you associate with him. But unfortunately, as you quite rightly said, Dave, this isn't like a poor month or poor couple of months. This is going on a lot longer than it should do for a goalkeeper of his stature.
If only that fax machine had worked that time that Real Madrid wanted to spend 100 million quid on him, Man United would be quids in and he would have gone, and who knows, maybe he would have maintained the level of performance that they wanted to pay, made them want to pay 100 million in the first place. Gary, great to have you back, great to have football back. Did you enjoy the experience of watching with the fake crowd noise or with no crowd noise, or how did you watch it?
Yeah, no, I had to go with both to begin with. I was saying that to Owen over the weekend, and there's no contest. You have to listen to it with a contrived noise, because even then when you're listening to it, I know some of the fans' reaction doesn't kind of normally sit in with what has happened, but it just feels more like a game. I know it's not panning to the stadium, seeing the empty stands, but rarely do you look at the stadium anyway when you're watching on telly. You're focusing on the players, but I'd much prefer it with that fake noise rather than listening to them in a training ground session. All right, good stuff, Gary. Great to have you with us. Thanks a million. Welcome back. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Take care.
It's Gary Breen there. We'll obviously talk about the rest of the week's football across the course of the rest of the week as well. 087 918 180 is the number. If you want to WhatsApp us, you can always tweet us using the hashtag OTB AM, or you can follow us on Twitter at Off The Ball. Now it's time for the sports pages.
OTB AM.
Right, we're going to start with OTBsports.com. Brian Kerr, Keane's punditry style is unlikely to impress potential employers. I do get the sense that Roy Keane doesn't want to be a manager again, despite the fact that he said in the Barry Egan piece in the Sunday Independent that he did, that actually he's going to earn an absolute fortune as a pundit on TV. We also have a story up now, just gone up this morning from Arthur. Suspend him indefinitely. McKenna's positive test sparks AFL reaction. So Ireland's Conor McKenna was found to have tested positive for COVID-19, and Essendon's AFL clash with Melbourne was subsequently postponed. And as a result of this, there's been a massive backlash against him. Apparently, he attended an open house viewing and visited some family and friends. But now, Essendon are saying that perhaps this is a false positive. So essentially, he's being blamed for bringing the entire league down, and they're not sure if the test was actually proper. He went to a home inspection with his partner. That was barred, says Ray Hadley, a controversial figure on the 2GB morning show. He visited friends. That was barred. So my way of thinking, this McKenna typifies the attitude of many Victorians. The rules don't apply to me, hence we have what we have now. He wants him suspended indefinitely for an act of stupidity that could cost the AFL hundreds of millions of dollars, let alone the players. The AFL will be a basket case because of the stupidity of one person. They have those type of radio presenters in Australia as well, it turns out. Dave?
Yeah, it would appear so. I for one am happy to hold fire on Conor McKenna until we get more details. I know that the occurrence of a false positive isn't a frequent thing, but this could be an exception to the rule. If he has breached AFL guidelines and AFL rules when it comes to the manner in which players are supposed to be approaching the lockdown, or I know the restrictions to visa considered in Australia, if he has broken some rules, they will have to look at that. But let's just see how this plays out, because I'm not going to take the word of Mr. Hadley and use that to inform my own opinion as to whether McKenna has been wayward in what he should have been doing. We'll see.
IRFU needs the book thrown at him. What have you got for us?
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the Examiner this morning. There's a couple of interesting pieces on the back page of their sports section. Terrace Talk with Stephen Kelly is usually an interesting read. The upside to global warming, he says, they'll disappear first. That's a reference to the fact that Everton's new stadium is due to be built right on the banks of the Mersey. And if or when climate change really starts to affect this part of the world and water levels begin to rise, he's happy enough that the new Goodison Park will fall into the River Mersey before Anfield does, which is an unusual take on the Merseyside rivalry, which I thought was largely absent in, if you take it, the evidence of that game last night. Rusty Reds have misplaced swagger. That's the piece from Nick Callow from Goodison Park last night. Poor game, 0-0. Not an awful lot to report on from that match. And Safety First Football, the prevailing theme of Project Restart. That's from Daniel Story again. And general assessment from him on what he's seen over the last few days, where maybe it hasn't been the rip-roaring return to football we've been hoping for, but for understandable reasons, I think.
The Irish Independent back page this morning. GPA urge Croker Chiefs to scrap provincials for a year. So the GPA have written to their members, and they're saying that they want if there is going to be a shortened season, that they want an open draw with no provincial championships. And the letter says the GAA have positioned the intercounty competitions at the latter end of the year to maximise attendances. They now need to respect the views of intercounty players on these issues and the high-performing unit of our sport. The intercounty game needs to be given the respect it deserves, which is calling for some compromises. And they also want to make sure that the injury prevention insurance scheme kicks in for all training sessions. 1 in 5 players who responded admitted they may not return to activity because it's not safe to do so. The GPA urged that any such decision made by a player should be respected by managers, county boards and supporters. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly how that all pans out over the next while. We weren't smart enough, admits Klopp, as weight goes on, and draw leaves Liverpool 5 points from title. So there's also Niall Quinn set to throw a hat in the ring for League of Ireland director role, which would be interesting. It's certainly putting his money where his mouth is when it comes to getting involved in Irish football.
The Times Ireland, they're leading again with that game at Goodison Park last night. Klopp given a fright. Everton come within inches of inflicting only Liverpool's second defeat of the season. Interesting numbers from the BBC on their first free-to-air Premier League game and their first Division 1 game, if you go back that far, since the 1980s. It was the game between Crystal Palace and Bournemouth. They were looking to break the record set by Sky, or Sky's all-time record for the broadcast for a Premier League game, but the BBC didn't quite manage to get to that. 3.9 million tuned in, which, if you take into account that it was Bournemouth Crystal Palace, probably isn't a poor return at all, but they were short of the peak reached by Sky when 4.4 million watched the Manchester Derby in 2012. 3.4 million watched Tottenham Manchester United on the previous evening, on Friday evening. And there's a story in tennis. We haven't heard many tennis stories over the last few months, but we know that this Novak Djokovic Adria Tour exhibition event has been taking place, and that has been halted because of a positive test for COVID-19. So tennis, among a number of sports, we just mentioned the AFL, that is under real danger of being halted again due to positive tests. The
back page of the Star this morning, inching closer. That's a picture of Klopp and Ancelotti not doing their social distancing. Lamps hails super subs, so obviously Frank Lampard made some good substitutions, and it's one of those humble brags. Yeah, my subs did really well. And League of Ireland return penciled in for July 31st. This is a Mark McCadden exclusive. The SSE Electricity League is set to return on the 31st of July in the wake of Friday's government announcement that they would be speeding up the country's emergence from coronavirus lockdown. Clubs will meet early this week to confirm a date. And Duignan says clubs have to resist county. Offaly Chairman Michael Duignan has called on county boards and the GPA to stand up to inter-county managers and insist club comes first. Our view in Offaly very much from the start was that the club should come first. From a social point of view, from a community point of view, I thought it was very important that our players would start back with their clubs, be very much part of their community and clubs. He was obviously speaking on the Sunday game last night, where he is a pundit. So that's the...
Yeah, and hopefully that will be the case, because the clubs, on the face of it, would appear to have been given an extra few weeks after the government's easing further restrictions on Friday, and that will give the GA a little more wriggle room. We'll see. Because
but if you're an inter-county manager, though, you want your players back training with you as soon as you can to make sure that they're up to the level where there is going to be a proper All-Ireland handed out. There will be a Sam Maguire, there will be a Liam McCarthy, and in a shortened, curtailed season, suddenly the difference between you and the other teams, that narrows a little bit. Like, does a shortened, curtailed winter football season suddenly bring Dublin back to the pack in football? On the face of it, you would say it probably does, right?
Yeah, anything that will be changed in the structure, I think, will not necessarily hurt Dublin, but it will assist the other teams, particularly if it's straight knockout. Look, any team can be caught on any given day, and I don't think Dublin just maybe having the situation where they're a little bit rusty is out of the question if they're up against a side from maybe a Division 2 or Division 3 in the league. But look, it's still highly unlikely. But at the same time, I think that this is an opportunity for the clubs to be given more time, a lot more time than they have been in previous seasons, and to actually get to play their championships for a couple of the summer months rather than maybe a couple of weeks here and there and then have to cobble it all together in October, November, December. We may never get this opportunity again. And I've got the Irish Daily Mail in front of me, and they followed that story as well. Philip Lanigan talking about what Michael Duignan was saying in the Sunday game last night, that he wants the GA and the GPA to club together. We'll see if that does happen, but it's a club window that maybe we may not have for several years to come. And just a reference again to the derby last night. Wait for it, Liverpool's title push is delayed by the derby draw. They'll have to wait until at least that game against Manchester City in a couple of weeks to seal the title.
The Irish Sun back page headline is drawn out. Mersey stalemate could end Cop hopes of clinching title at Anfield. Dozy to get banned. This is Gwen Doozy getting banned for grabbing somebody by the throat. And Darren says, keep her shut. Darren Randolph reckons Ireland can shut up shop in Slovakia if the fans are shut out. So that was no fans won't be good for Slovakia, not bad for us. That's the Sun.
Heading across to look at the Telegraph. Van Dijk, Liverpool are a step closer to title dream. Not an awful lot on that headline. They are. They took point at Goodison Park last night. And the reference to Djokovic, who's taken an emergency test of his own after that positive for Dimitrov. I know Novak Djokovic has been in the news as regards talk over vaccines and that kind of stuff, not just this last 3-4 months, but in previous years as well. But we'll see how that story plays out.
The Guardian have the same picture that everybody else has gone with from the ball hitting the post in the Merseyside derby. Edging closer, Liverpool survive late scares to take small step towards title. And Newcastle Saudi takeover boosted by illegal stream crackdown. So the longest running saga. I think one of the tactics probably is to make this story so boring that everybody goes, oh, just get it on with it, as opposed to actually it being something that needs to be talked about again and again. Because it probably is the fact that Saudi Arabia are going to own a club in the Premier League and all of the stuff that comes with that. So,
well, look, it's an incredibly interesting one, Ger, because if we are up in arms over some of the boxing stories over the last month or so, if we've questioned the human rights history of other clubs in the Premier League by virtue of the owners that have taken charge at some of these places, what will the debate surrounding Saudi Arabia be like, and how loud and how vociferous will it be from the fans outside of Newcastle, for example? Because I know Newcastle are obviously desperate for something to change. They do want a new era, a new dawn to come in, and they have been starved of success for so long under Mike Ashley. But if or when that takeover comes through, there's going to be a really interesting discussion around it. I'm on the Herald Sport this morning. Pool need fresh legs. Coleman shines as Reds unable to crack toffees, and players in call for an open draw. The GPA have told the GA that they want, on behalf of their membership, all inter-county training sessions prior to September 14 to be covered by the association's injury fund. But more significantly, there is talk that there's a groundswell of opinion in the GPA that they want an open draw, which I would absolutely love to see, just as a once-off, just to see how it goes. It's not something we've ever seen in our era, even going back to the pre-qualifier days where some of the provincial championship draws were seeded, and obviously the provincial championships were still played, so Dublin couldn't end up playing Kerry in the opening round.
Return of the Jump Stars. It's Limerick today. Big names are back on a landmark day at Limerick. That's the front page of the Racing Post, and there's a preview of Man City Burnley on the back of that. And I think we've got the Irish News for you as well. McNulty expects Stormont to align with South over restart. So that's Justin McNulty talking about a hope that there won't be an issue in restarting Gaelic games because obviously of the border. And then Poole can't hit the heights. And Rogers GA needs to clarify COVID-19 protocols. There's still a lot of questions about exactly how it's all going to play out. Let's take a look at what's on the OTB Sports app for you this morning. When you open the app, obviously, it lands on your personalised home feed. Some of our featured articles this morning. How's the Head with Alan Quinlan, a brand new series launching today. We're going to tell you about that in a moment. Then there's the Conor McKenna story, the Tyrone player's positive COVID test causing mayhem in the AFL, and some brilliant reaction as well from the lads from the Premier League at the weekend. Go to the radio section to listen to OTB Sports Radio. You'll find our latest video as well in the video section. And then there's the OTB Podcast Network, where we release over 40 podcasts every week. You can listen and subscribe to whatever you want. It's very, very easy. And it's a beautiful, slick piece of kit that we're very proud of here. So just search OTB Sports in the Play Store or the App Store, and you'll be able to get it for free, gratis, and for nothing. Now, Alan Quinlan's going to join us next here on OTB AM this morning. We're delighted to say his new series, How's the Head, launches today across OTB Sports at 12 o'clock. You're going to be able to hear his brilliant interview with John Kerwin exclusively on the OTB Sports app. He's been talking to a range of different personalities from different fields. Pat Short and Danny O'Reilly are going to focus on how they keep their mental health in order. First episode is a very revealing conversation with the former All Blacks legend John Kerwin. You can hear Alan Quinlan's How's the Head first on OTB Sports Radio from midday today. The easiest way to listen is the OTB Sports app. Download the brand new OTB Sports app today.
My reference to mental health back then was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? So I wouldn't talk to anyone. And I wouldn't talk to anyone because I thought I was going to get locked up with Jack Nicholson and, you know, that big American Indian guy. And they're both saner than most people, you know what I'm saying? But that was my reference to it. So the only reference that I had to mental health was negative. So I wasn't going to talk to anyone about it. The second part is, why me? Right?
Yeah.
That was even worse because why would I be depressed? I'm an All Black. I've got a free car. You know what I'm saying?
You go to work in a tracksuit.
Yeah. Don't even have to buy rugby boots anymore. I mean, what's going on? But that made me worse because I had no excuses because my perception of mental health was it was a weakness. And it's not a weakness. It is everybody's way of life. You're good, you're bad, you're up and down on the scale. And it's because I ignored those things that I fell into this massive hole. The other really interesting thing for me to talk about the second bit is I thought that it was like something that I was going to be trapped in for the whole of my life. And I know there are some extreme, mental health that you do have to be really sort of, conscious of and take medicine for the whole of your life. But for me, once I accepted my illness and said, this is the way I am, then I could start to get better. But the more I fought it, the more I got angry and the more I got pissed off because I was going, why me? But when I accepted it, I just wanted to be great at it after that.
Yeah, that's great stuff coming your way from noon today on OTB Sports Radio, which you can get on the OTB Sports app. Alan Quinlan, good morning to you. How you doing?
Very good, Ger. And yourself?
I'm good. Normal life is beginning to emerge a little bit back. We have the rugby players training today, and I don't know if everybody's wearing masks out where you guys are, but that's not really the case where I am. One thing that I'm very interested in seeing happen is if we take any of the lessons from the last few months and actually don't just go back to the old way of doing stuff. And that's why I think How's the Head is very interesting, because you did find that people were being very honest about anxieties that they had, because everybody was anxious. And so it was perfectly normal to go, how are you? Well, I'm a bit freaked out. To be honest, I'm a bit freaked out. It looks like the world might be about to end. And that's why I think conversations about mental health now are going to be very important, and even more so into the future, where we reach a new level of honesty and talking to each other about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that was the whole idea, it wasn't to launch a podcast and for any kind of benefit for myself, I wanted to just try and see if we could have some conversations with people, not necessarily all people who have mental health problems. I know John Kerwin is very outspoken about his challenges and battles, but just I was pretty interested and intrigued at how other people were doing during a completely unsettling period, as you say. People, and I was concerned for people who maybe avail of services or counselling or medical support, and that was all kind of shut off a little bit for them during the pandemic, and how would they cope? And I just thought no better person to have a chat with, to see how he was coping. And even though we're coming towards the end, you know, the lockdown has been lifted and all that now, I think listening to John Kerwin, every time I listen to him, he gives me hope and confidence that the world is changing around the approach to mental health, not just for people who in society who struggle with mental health, but for everybody really. And he's inclusive in that. Business people who are successful, sports people, their mental health can be affected as well. And sometimes we look at somebody and we see success and we see money and we see success in sport or business and we think they've no reason. And he speaks about that. So he's a perfect example of someone who was a pin-up boy in New Zealand. Everybody looked up to him. He was tall, handsome, probably the most marketable sports person in New Zealand, and he was struggling internally. So I think there's a lot of good messages there, and it was really intriguing to have that chat with him. Pat Short and Danny O'Reilly, I had a chat with them as well, just to really see how their lives were going through this. So it was very interesting.
I hope it's something that we integrate into how we talk to our kids into the future as well, as opposed to waiting until they're at a point of crisis and going, oh, it's okay to talk about this now. Actually, that we get involved in a bit of preventative stuff as opposed to it all being reactionary.
Yeah, I think to be fair to the sporting organisations and to employers throughout Ireland, I've seen a massive change in the conversations that are being having, the awareness around mental health, how important it is. For when I was growing up as a kid, it was something you never spoke about. It wasn't mentioned in school. There was no empathy towards mental health. It was toughen up, get on with it. You got to be resilient. And resilience is a very important part of mental health. And sometimes it frustrates me when people say, you know, you've got to be resilient. You've got to take knocks. You've got to take setbacks. Of course you have. But I think if things are festering in people and they're emotionally, they get entangled, if you like, and they can't deal with the negativity or the dark picture in their head, I think they need help. And so society is changing around that. And I think it's very heartwarming for me. I've been to lots of schools throughout Ireland, and, you know, you see lots of kids doing mental health projects and really setting a great standard in their own schools. Obviously, the parents or the teachers and the schools are facilitating this and encouraging them. So it's about education as well, Ger, and it's about education for kids in school, but also young people playing sport, because sometimes that emotional roller coaster of winning and losing and rejection and not being picked in the team really has a negative effect on young kids' confidence. And if coaches are more aware of that and how they deal and speak to young kids and maybe have an open conversation with parents and stuff like that, the kids can get their confidence and self-belief back and understand what they need to work on. So it's a really, really important part of working life, of sporting life, I think. And it's not a negative thing, it's a very positive thing.
Yeah, 100%. And really looking forward to that. Going live today at 12 noon on OTB Sports Radio, and you can get it on the OTB Sports app after that. Let's talk a little bit about rugby coming back, because obviously it's great that we now have a fixture schedule and, you know, all being well, those matches in August will happen, the Interpros, and by that stage you would hope that things have opened up and travel bridges and all that kind of stuff that they're talking about will facilitate games between the provinces here and Wales and Scotland, and the league will be able to finish, and hopefully Champions Cup will be able to finish. In the meantime, there seems to be a bit of a battle emerging between the players and the union about just how much money the union actually have access to and how much of a pay cut the players are going to be willing to take. So there's definitely a negotiation to be had at the moment.
Yeah, it's something that's been spoken about for the last week and a half, and Rugby Players Ireland, the players' representative body, which do a wonderful job, and they're very, very important in a lot of negotiations. They were important when I was playing. When you're dealing with match payments, bonuses, fees going to World Cups, things like that, and they're an important negotiator for the players. I think without the players, I think the game isn't there. Without the IRFU, the finance isn't there and the structure. So they've got to work in tandem. And I think Rugby Players Ireland weren't happy that some stuff went to the media about player cuts and wage cuts and stuff like that. So I think there was more positive talks last week, and they haven't finalised what the pay cuts are going to be. But I think it's something that the players have to accept. Ultimately, there is going to be a little bit of pain here. The top players are very well paid. I think it's the younger players and the academy players and the development contracts and stuff like that. Hopefully they won't be affected. But I think the top players are going to have to accept some sort of pay cuts. And hopefully that gets sorted, because you don't want to see the players in the union at loggerheads. I think from, the IRFU, to be fair, are very well managed from a financial point of view. The structures here are very good. We speak about that. We're the envy of a lot of countries. And the IRFU before this were in pretty good shape financially. But if you're draining €1 million a month and no crowds in the foreseeable future, and sponsorships in doubt, hospitality and venues, all that kind of stuff, opportunities to bring in revenue. So I think it's just inevitable that it's going to happen, but hopefully it gets sorted out and the players will agree. And I think that was the whole hub of it, that it was released publicly.
Is it a difficult thing to manage, Alan, if players are returning to training, and obviously players talk and they're in their little groups and they're chatting about what's going on in the background, with this bubbling under the surface as people get back onto the training paddock and start looking towards these fixtures that we finally now can look forward to, that it's something awkward for management and coaching teams to be able to stay on top of, to keep lads focused and for training to be as good as it normally would be?
Yeah, well, I think, Ger, they will all be looking forward to getting back to training. There'll be an air of excitement. I think it'll be different. They'll be in groups of 7 with one coach and all the protocols and stuff like that. There won't be much hanging around or having a cup of coffee or having food together. So it is a little bit different. And they're the parts as a rugby player you love. You love going in, having the banter, having the bit of crack in the group. So that's going to be a little bit different for them for a while. Regarding the pay cuts, I think the senior players, the Irish players in Munster, the Irish players in Leinster might be having a little bit of a whisper about what's happening. They'll be speaking to each other about how those negotiations are going. So they've got to be professional. I think they're very well paid, the Irish players. I don't think the provincial players will be chatting too much about it. I'm not sure how they're going to be affected. Obviously, if you're on a big Irish contract, 20% off that is a fairly sizable amount. But again, it's something they're just going to have to accept. I think if I was a player, and I mean this respectfully to the players, they've got to take a little bit of pain here, and that's just the reality of it. But I don't think it'll be an issue for provincial coaches getting them ready for 22nd of August. I think this stuff will be parked to one side, and that's what Rugby Players Ireland are going to do. And I'm sure some of the players who'll be working with Rugby Players Ireland, chatting to the RFU, they'll agree a deal. It'll be done. There'll be a line drawn under it, and they'll move forward. I think there will be a lot of excitement about getting back in groups for the next couple of weeks.
Football at the weekend came back, Alan, obviously in Premier League. Some good performances from individuals, some good performances from some teams, some really horrific performances from other teams and other individuals. So you can kind of see that everybody's at different stages of preparedness for it. What's the rugby been like in New Zealand by comparison? It's been good. I think better than I expected. I think there's lots of penalties and lots to break, particularly at the breakdown. A lot of turnovers as well, which it's kind of like pre-season matches. Really, they came straight from a break for nearly 3 months into competitive matches. They had no friendlies. It was just training ground, trying to replicate contact and smaller matches and training and stuff like that. So it's fully understandable. The Blues have hit the ground running. They've won their 2 games and they look very, very strong. But lots of mistakes, Ger. But there's still that air of excitement about it. The Crusaders were brilliant at the weekend. They beat the Hurricanes 39-25 and scored 5 tries. And
They just keep rolling the players out in New Zealand. And the Chiefs, of course, Warren Gatland's team have lost their first 2 games last week to the Highlanders, and they were beaten by the Blues in Hamilton, which didn't happen in a long, long time at the weekend.
Dave, you've been watching some rugby league.
I have, yeah. It was one of the first sports that came back. They were one of the first sports that I saw where they have the piped in crowd sound and everything, and it's actually a really good watch. And I haven't really watched rugby league in detail since Martin Afai and Sean Edwards were playing for Wigan in the 1980s, and Jonathan Davies was with the Warrington Wolves in rugby league. And I have to say, I should have been watching more of it. It's a phenomenal sport to watch. There's a lot to be said for the absence of the line-outs and the scrum resets and the rucks and the mauls and the pick and jams and the inordinate amount of time spent by scrum halves as they prepare to throw a box kick in over the head of the fullback or the wingers. And the willingness to offload at will is phenomenal to watch. The standard of the passing is absolutely incredible. Now, I know I'm watching the highest level. This is the NRL that I'm watching, but I'm definitely going to watch more of it. There's always a fear among rugby union aficionados that with every tweak of the rules, they're edging closer to a game of rugby league. I don't know how true that is, but for me, that wouldn't necessarily be a terrible thing, because the quickness of the game, and particularly at scrum time, obviously it's not really a scrum. It's just a really quick means to restart the game. I couldn't take my eyes off it. The standard of the kicking as well, the little grubber kicks on the 6th tackle, the up and unders that they throw in and around the 20-metre area. I was sat down and watched an entire game on Saturday morning, and I enjoyed every second of it.
Right, well, you might get your wish if the rest of the law changes happen. Alan, great stuff. Congratulations on the new series. Really looking forward to it. It's going live this afternoon. Alan Quinlan's How's the Head live today on the OTB Sports app from 12 noon. And John Kerwin, the legend, is Alan's first guest. Now, as you will have heard over the last few weeks, OTB are partnering with BMW and Triathlon Ireland to take part in the Run and Ride for Pieta, which is a cycle and run challenge that's supporting Pieta House and is proudly supported by BMW Ireland. There's a group of us here in OTB who've been training for the last few weeks ahead of the duathlon, which we broadcast live right here on OTB AM on Friday, the 17th of July. That's much closer than I thought it was. I thought we had like another 5 or 6 weeks for this. And I'm delighted to say Michael Black, the cycling coach to Triathlon Ireland, is going to join us next here on OTB AM to give us some quick tips around cycling. Back after these.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Football is back.
For Sterling! Raheem Sterling!
Like the rest of us returning to work, the Premier League is also back. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. Live updates and analysis of this summer's Premier League action. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Missing this?
This is the dream. Shohei on Ringload. Whether you're from Cushendall in Antrim or Mount Sion in Watford, this is what it's all about.
And get this, the all-new OTB Sports app. Off the Ball, Ireland's premier sports channel, now has a new home, featuring the biggest names in Irish and world sports. Podcasts, interviews, news, commentary, analysis, plus almost 20 years of sporting archives. All free and ready when you are, at home or on the go. The new OTB Sports app. Download it now from the App Store and Google Play.
OTB AM.
Right, so I've been away for the 2 weeks that we've started the BMW Run and Ride, and I kind of feel like I was duped a little bit. It says duathlon, and it's actually run, cycle, run. I thought it was like run and then cycle. It turns out you've got to run, get on the bike, get off the bike, and run again. So it's essentially a triathlon, Dave. I feel a little bit duped. The one thing that I'm actually definitely going to be able to do, though, is the cycle. And I'm delighted to say Michael Black is the cycling coach with Triathlon Ireland here to give us some hints and tips. Michael, good morning to you. How you doing?
Morning, boys. How are you getting on?
You would think that running and cycling are fairly similar, but actually anybody who has waddled off the bike and realised that everything is seized up after a cycle, it's not the case. Why is this so mechanically different when they look so fairly similar?
Yeah, it is. It has a different kind of training stimulus. Obviously, running obviously is a lot more intense. Your bones and your muscles or everything is getting the demands from the pavement on the ground or whatever surface you're running on. So it's a lot more physically challenging than being on the bike. Being on the bike, your weight is bared on the bike, very similar to swimming. So you're not taking that abuse that you would normally get from being on the road. So that's why, and as you said yourself, that duathlon aspect of it, when you get off the bike and try and run, it's not a pleasant experience, especially if you've went pretty hard on the bike previously and then trying to run fairly hard off the bike. So it's just that different type of training stimulus. But if you go hard on anything, it'll hurt pretty much no matter what you're on.
Is there actually a different way of training for the cycling in a triathlon when you know you have to do the run after it than there would be if it was just a pure cycle race?
Yeah, there is a certain element of pacing in any kind of multi-discipline or multi-sport activity like that. So yeah, typically the strong bikers would push the bike pretty hard because they know that's their discipline and they can gain a lot more time on it. But they have to be well aware that they have to run off the bike. So the training doesn't really change that much until you get into the real racing end of things, when you start to talking about times and distances and really getting down to the nitty-gritty of trying to pace yourself so that you can get the best out of yourself once you go onto the run. But typically, no, it's much the same type of training, especially at beginner level.
We've been getting a bit of advice about the running, and everybody was apparently going out running too hard and too fast. So
yeah,
they're kind of same pace on each training run, but actually the advice is to go slow, fast, and do one fast one every 3 or 4 goes.
Yeah.
So that, like, I don't know what that's called, if that's a form of period.
No, it is. Yeah, there is certain elements, kind of interval training, or you've got, I suppose you can look at it in terms of periodization, where you're trying to break your week or your month or your year into certain elements of different types of fitness that you're working on. But yeah, it's an endurance sport. No matter what the distance is, you're going to be on the bike and running and everything else for, could be upwards of an hour or even more. So it is typically an endurance sport. And if you're not haven't got that experience of coming from an endurance background, you're going to have to build up that cardiovascular fitness just to be able to get used to the distance that you're and the time that you're on your bike and on your feet after the run. So yeah, generally people start off way too hard and just gas themselves out, so they're busted by the time they even come to even doing the run. Or even if you hear maybe some people talking about bonking on the bike or hitting the wall in a marathon, it's that type of feeling where you've just nothing left, and that generally is down to two things. Maybe nutrition's bad, but more so that you've went too hard at the start and you just don't have that fitness yet to be able to go at that speed. So slowing down a little bit at the start, you'll find yourself warming up, you'll find yourself getting a lot more used to the pace, and you can actually start, funnily enough, enjoying it. Maybe you guys aren't at that stage yet right now, but with the weeks and months that come on, hopefully you will start to enjoy it a little bit.
Michael, is there a way, Ger referenced getting off the bike there and everything seems like it's seized up, and for some people who are maybe getting on the bike for the first time or for the first time in a long time, is there a way to mitigate the effects of being in that lock position where you're slightly hunched over, your hands are on the handlebars and your body isn't necessarily moving outside of your legs? I tried to get on the bike a good bit over the course of the lockdown because my knees were starting to hurt from a little bit of running. How can we mitigate that? Because it stopped me getting back on it. My back was starting to seize up.
Like, I suppose there's two things that, one, you're going to get a lot more used to it the more times you practice it, which, sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but the more times you do it, you will get used to it. But secondly, a lot of it is about, your mobility and your own flexibility and stuff being on the bike. So again, make sure you're sitting on your bike and fitted on the bike properly. So even taking your bike to your local bike shop and actually telling the guys on there, can you just check me over to make sure I'm actually positioned on this bike correctly? Is my seat okay? Is my handlebars okay? And that will take out any kind of doubts that you might have that it's not just you, it could be I'm just not sitting on the bike properly. And then a little bit of flexibility and mobility yourself. So working on your lower back especially. So stretching that lower back out as much as possible when you're off the bike. And even your hamstrings and your quads and your hip flexors. So any general kind of stretching type program that you could do every day will massively help your comfort on the bike. And when you get off the bike, even the most experienced people are going to find it really hard. You get that jelly legs type feeling where your brain tells you want to go, but your body's saying not a hope here. I'm not going any further type thing.
Yes.
And you try and put your leg forward and it just doesn't go where it wants to go, and you feel you're going to fall on your hands and nose. So You do get a lot better at it. I find that, once you get off the bike, the quicker you can try and get into your running pattern, the better. So sometimes that means for the first, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, putting that wee bit more effort in first and trying to get back into your natural stride. If you keep it very, very short and contained, you're only just going to stick to that type of short levers and short muscles and everything. So try and extend your running as much as you possibly can when you get off the bike into your stride, and keep things moving as much as possible. And I find that you get a lot more bang for your buck once the distance starts to get longer and longer. But you will get used to it. But it's not a pleasant experience for the first couple of minutes when you jump off the bike and try and run, for sure.
What about the actual cycling itself? Is there a difference in the body position? Like, where should you grip your bike on your handlebars? Like, what is the most efficient and what is the best way to do it?
Yeah, and that comes back to obviously your bike fit. Once you get your bike fit done there, typically you've got your two hands just sitting on your two hands in front of you, your back of your hands facing up to the sky, more or less. That's probably the most upright position. It may not be the most aero position. You're going to be taking a lot of wind in that, but it's typically the most comfortable. As you get used to it, and as I say, you get your back loosened out a bit, you can move on to the drops, which is if you're on a road bike where you've got the handlebars kind of curved at the front, you can kind of move your hands down there a little bit closer to the brakes. It's a little bit more aero, so you're not taking as much wind and you might go a little bit faster, but it does take a little bit of mobility and flexibility, and you might not be as stable down there as you are when you have your hands up there. If you're on a hybrid on a mountain bike, you'll typically have just your handles on the standard position the whole time. But it's really about the personal preference. Whatever's comfortable to you, you're better getting comfortable first, and you're going to push a hell of a lot harder and feel a lot more comfortable, rather than trying to gain, 5-10% and getting a wee bit more aero, but you're absolutely busted just trying to stay in that position.
Yeah, and I presume pins and needles aren't great.
No, pins and needles is not. No, sometimes you tend to find it maybe in your pinch points around your ankles, around your wrists. If you're getting that, or even in your toes and things, it's generally down to bad either position that you're on the bike or bad fitting equipment, so your shoes or your shorts. And that's another thing. Like, if you can invest in a really good pair of shorts, it'll be the best investment you make in terms of a bike, outside of getting it serviced and looking after it. If you've got a nice padded pair of shorts that you think are massively expensive at the time, it's the best buy you can definitely get. Your backside is going to be, it's going to be sore for a little while until you get used to being just on that position on the saddle. So a nice pair of comfortable fitting shorts is a very, very good investment if you can. We're
all doing the sprint distance. How far should we be going at this stage? So it's a 20k cycle, a run, a cycle, and then the sprint is going to be 20k. So I'm actually doing 20k most days at the moment, and it's okay.
It's fine, that's the thing, yeah. And I said that to a couple of people before. Just treat this like a bit of a training. You'd be very surprised at the distance that you can achieve in that. But split your week up. If you find it very comfortable doing 20k, maybe at the weekend, push it out to maybe another 10k extra at 30k. But again, just look after your pace and try and enjoy the scenery around you, being out. And you'll get a longer type cycle, so that'll make your 20Ks a little bit easier. Then if you just keep going to the one distance all the time, that'll be your limiting factor, and you'll find that'll be the hardest, just to break past that barrier. So break past that barrier and go a little bit further. Don't even worry too much about the distance. Just go for time. Just say, I'm going to go for a couple of hours here. Stay in a nice safe loop, so if you do get a little bit tired, you can bail out halfway through if you think you're getting tired. But the bike gives you so much freedom, and what the areas you can explore are fantastic, and it gets you outside your borders where you'd normally just walk or drive to. And then you can put a little bit of fast one in if you want during the week. If you're doing 20k, simple warm up for 5k, do a little bit harder for 5k, go easier then for 5k, and then push the last 5k hard. So it just breaks it up a little bit into a little bit of intervals. And what that will do, it'll make your 20k at the very end feel a lot easier, because you've actually worked past your supposed limit from the previous ones. So as much as you can mix it up as much as you can, But again, just treat it like training, and you're naturally going to get fitter over the 6 weeks, and the 20k will be no problem to use and end up.
Well, I hope you're right, Michael. Good stuff. Good, clear advice for us there. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. So Michael Black giving us some thoughts there about how to become better cyclists. This week's challenge is to run 5k, ride 15 and run 5k, all completed on separate days. This is all part of the BMW Run and Ride for Pieta. It's a cycle and run challenge that's supporting Pieta House, proudly supported by BMW Ireland. You can still register. Head over to Triathlon Ireland's website to sign up. There's a group of us here who've been doing it, and we're going to be broadcasting it live on the 17th of July. That's Friday, here on OTB AM. We're going to be checking in with various experts and coaches along the way over the next few weeks. And if you've got any questions for us on those, then you can WhatsApp us 0879 180 180, and we'll be giving away plenty of prizes to give away, with thanks to BMW Ireland over the next while as well. Now, Declan Bogue and Colm Bradley are going to join us next on OTB AM for Fermanagh's Mt Rushmore. First of all, let's listen back to the Saturday panel very briefly here, where we talked about Ulster football in the 2000s. It's very relevant. Have a listen.
But there's no point pretending we are back to normal yet. It is still there, lurking in the background. I think we need to tread carefully, but certainly it's brilliant the way it's going. The potential for at least some games is brilliant. But I would agree with Enda. I think there's an opportunity there to maybe experiment with formats, because there's nothing to lose this year. We thought several weeks ago that the season was completely gone. And now as bonus territory, it would be a pity to just try to squeeze in the old formats and really squeeze them in rather than maybe experimenting with something new.
Are you both knew each other? Go on, Andy.
It's pretty exciting in that, you imagine Tyrone playing against Kerry in a first round of a championship. There's a different way of running the championship this year that maybe we've never done before. And the other thing is, I think we can learn from the biggest organisations in the world, not only sporting organisations, about how they're coordinating their staff in terms of getting back to work. We can learn from that amazing systematic approach. So pretty exciting times about what this is going to mean, not only for GAA, but all sporting bodies right throughout the country and the world.
Was the football good?
To be honest, it sort of stands up well compared to maybe more modern fare. It was kamikaze. It wasn't very controlled or contrived the way maybe the modern game has went. So it still looks good. You had stunning, talented players playing at the very top of the game. I'm speaking of the likes of Stevie McDonald, Arshie McConville, Stevie O'Neill, Brian McGuigan, like them players. Some of the things they done in them games was immense, but it was the sheer physicality, the aggression by both teams. Neither team giving an inch. So there was, whilst it mightn't have been for the purist, although I would say it still is massively entertaining when you look back at them, you can't deny the quality coming from the fact that you had two teams at the very top of their game going at each other as their life depended on it, and I don't think you can ask for more than that from a GA point of view.
I think the football was great, John. I would agree with Enda on that one there. If you think about some of the players in that pitch, and Enda listed a number of them, I would say some of those players arguably were as good as any player in the last 50 years. You think about the Canavans, the McGuineas, the McGrains, the Marsden, the Mulligans, the Doohers, the McAnallans, God rest them. So some of those footballers were arguably would get in any team in Ulster in the last 50 years, and maybe even any team in an Ireland series in the last 50 years. Some of them certainly like the Canavans and the McGuineas and so on. But what I do also think is the intelligence of the players. The ability for some of those players to coordinate the offence or the defence. So some of the things that happened during those years shaped that defensive system that still is obviously very formidable in today's game. So a lot of the things that happened in those games, I think, shaped the tactical evolution and really accelerated that. Did it make the game better or worse? Your listeners today can argue whether it made it better or worse, but it certainly shifted the game in terms of the tactical evolution.
You need to put a health warning with it.
OTB AM's Mt Rushmore, live every weekday at 7:30 AM on OTB Sports Radio.
Yeah, it's time for us to get into Fermanagh's Mt Rushmore. Declan Bogue is the OTB selector and Colm Bradley is the OTB challenger. This is very simple. Declan Bogue throws four names at the wall and Colm Bradley can pick one off and replace it. And Fermanagh is the county that we're doing this week. If anybody wants to get involved in this conversation, use the hashtag OTBAM on Twitter or leave a comment wherever you are. Declan Bogue, good morning to you.
Morning, Ger.
No pressure. No pressure. This is easy. You know,
Ger, it feels like off the ball has been leading up to this moment, doesn't it?
For Fermanagh, I mean, ultimately, yes.
No, the whole entire enterprise of off the ball is really this is the peak now. Like we can't go any higher.
Well, look, I'm delighted I was here to see the peak after all these years, finally to reach the peak, and it's all downhill, and I'm sure it's very comfortable at the bottom. Colm Bradley, how are you getting on?
Not too bad at all.
Have people been lobbying you? Ultimately, you're kind of an editor role here where you can fix any of the mistakes that Declan makes at the last minute, swoop in, rescue the situation, and then you can all ride away into the sunset in glory. Have people been lobbying you to make sure that you get this decision right?
A few people have, and then when I suggested one or two names, there was a few people who were incredulous with me, so I'm sort of a bit apprehensive too.
Right. Declan, outsiders might not know what kind of a sporting county is Fermanagh, really.
Quirky, probably light on, kind of world beaters and huge illustrious success, maybe, in football and hurling. Have a league of Irish League team in Ballymonagh only really recently have competed at any sort of a higher level. What you have there is Lough Erne, though, and you have an awful lot of water sports and stuff like that. Wee bit of surfing, quite a bit of canoeing and rowing, a few bits and pieces of runners knocking about. So I would say that the sort of beauty in Fermanagh lies in the quirky kind of tales. I mean, you've got someone like, say, for example, and she probably won't make it or anything like that, but Sean Hurst would be like one of the top wakeboarders in the world. But, you probably you're not going to get much wakeboarding in Tyrone, but you're going to get plenty of that kind of stuff in Fermanagh.
Maybe we as a country need to revisit our approach to water sports and stuff like wakeboarding and go, being an island here is something that we should take advantage of. Being a country that has as many lakes as we do and some very navigable waterways, maybe this is our opportunity to kind of bring these sports out blinking into the sunlight.
Yeah, perhaps so. I mean, it's very easy to just get bogged down in, okay, well, who done what and who was most famous and who played for the biggest teams and all that. But the further you go down into this, the more research you do, you turn up brilliant kind of stories. And in some ways, there's a lot of kind of history of Fermanagh sport, and would be through the old Patoran type. The Patora Royal School there is right on the lake in Enniskillen, and they would have a lot of rowing, a lot of cricket, stuff like that. Sam Beckett was a renowned cricketer, batsman, a bit of an all-rounder, but I suppose batsman was one of his strongest elements. He was a brilliant boxer too. Then you've got the like of Declan Burns, in a huge canoeing movement, like that really had huge momentum behind it in the 80s. So you've got a lot of different things feeding into it. I mean, someone like, say, for example, the first recorded woman ever playing rugby was Emily Valentine, whose father was the headmaster of Patora. So it's the first time anything was ever recorded about a woman playing rugby was Emily Valentine, who scored a try for Patora School alongside her brothers in the backs. That was, 1887, my research was telling me. So you've got odd kind of things like that. Like, we're not going to...
Is Patora, is it in Enniskillen?
Yes.
So it's that big red brick, it's kind of the big forbidding looking gates that as you're driving out of the town. Is it in there on the right?
That's absolutely right, yeah, as you're heading towards Donegal or the Shore Road or anything like that. Yeah, Ger, you know your stuff. But it's not, I don't think it's red brick now. It's a more Georgian type architecture. Wilde went there, Beckett went there. So, Colm there, for example, is following in the footsteps of the sort of literary people from that county, educated in the county.
Are you going to put Sam Beckett on the? Is there any prospect of just putting him up there as a,
Hey, no. I mean, he was renowned in his time or whatever, and just had looked at a wee bit about his stuff, and number one, it's like Wilde, he was only really a boarder at the school. and he had no regard for any skill. I think my father once sent me an extract of something where he had written a letter home and talked about it being a small, squat, low slung, sort of dung covered town. So he's gone. He's gone. Sorry, son.
That's pretty good though. That's the boy could write. It turns out. Colm, when you were thinking about this, what were your own personal criteria? What did you decide that you wanted to kind of put on it? I mean, bear in mind we're going to chisel this out and it's going to be there forever. So when you were thinking about it, what did you actually want to pay attention to and give deference to?
I think the big thing was how they were regarded, within the county, what they sort of made people feel. Declan sort of touched on it there. We are a quirky county when it comes to sports, and we don't have maybe some of the huge international stars. You look at Cork and you have Roy Keane, Sonia O'Sullivan, and all the rest. But I think in the middle of not having a huge amount of sport and success, we maybe possibly even look up more to our sports stars than other counties. I mean, like when I was growing up, Peter McGinty was as close to a deity that you could get. He really was. You were following Fermanagh GA. The football team was losing every year in the Ulster Championship. There was no sort of light at the end of the tunnel. It was one game and you were out. But Peter was this like shining beacon who captained Railway Cup teams when they meant something, who you knew was as good as anybody else in the country. And there was a phenomenal pride in Peter, that all Fermanagh people had. And I think that sort of, rings through. Declan talked about the Olympians there. And, you had Anne Cairns who went to Olympic Games. Declan Burns, you mentioned, went to 3 Olympic Games 12 years apart. So a lot of our success was individual sports, certainly when I was growing up, and sort of individual accolades. And you were very proud of those people. We also had a world champion bog snorkeler. Now, I know it's not a very exciting sport. There's a few bogs in Tyrone, so they might do it there as well. But Danica Maguire won 3 back-to-back world championships, 2011, 12 and 13, set world records. And she's now a pretty serious rower. She's rowing for Ireland. So there was, as Declan says, an awful lot of cork in there.
I wasn't quite sure if bog snorkeling was a thing that they just did that kind of, where you toss the caber. It's a real thing.
Very serious sport. It's a very serious sport, Jared. We take it very seriously here.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you produced world champions. And I hope there's a grant. Let's talk a little bit about Peter McGinty, because he comes up in a couple of years. What era are we talking about here, Declan Bogue? When did Peter McGinty? When was he important?
Well, Ger, I'm absolutely delighted that Colm's going to be talking about Gaelic football, because, Colm himself was a fine player for club and county, probably underrated as a player within his own county. But the point is that when Fermanagh had a wee bit of success in the 2000s, not only was Colm sharing the same dressing room as the like of Rory Gallagher and Barry Owens and Marty McGrath, who will come up in this conversation, he also happened to be brought up 2 doors down from Peter McGinty, so he's on to hiding to absolutely nothing. Peter McGinty's, he only took up football, and Colm can correct me on this, I think when he was about 15. He didn't really play any football until he was well into St Michael's. And then I think within about 18 months of first playing football, he was playing for Fermanagh, made his debut against Westmeath in the National League at about 16 and a half, 17, snuck out of his parents' home in Rushmore to go to this game. And then he was part of that very successful under-21 team, which I think won Ulster in 70 and 71. Colm, I think they got the 2 All-Ireland finals, were beaten by Cork in both of them. I think Billy Morgan was the goalkeeper and perhaps captain for Cork in both those. But from then on, really, you see this looking back over games of the 80s, the little bit of footage that you have from Fermanagh, when you could see the players were clearly not trying. You could see interviews with, say, John McElroy was the Fermanagh manager for a long, long time, and said that the clubs weren't interested in the county. the county boys, it was a complete gather up for most of the time. You had to beg lads to come to training. You had to convince them that, you know, actually playing for the county was worth something. McGinnity was sort of turning in these top class performances. I mean, Martin Breheny done his recent, you know, top whatever it was, 100 players of the GA, and he done his top 20 in each county. But he makes a point that, you know, there was a book that was produced by Jerome Quinlan in 1983, and he asked all the players and managers, some prominent players and managers of the time, to pick their best Ulster team of all time, or their time. Brian McIntyre, Peter McGrath, Art McCrory, Jimmy Smith and Jim Riley, they all chose McGinnity either midfield or wing forward. And McGrath said that McGinnity was a Rolls-Royce player, effortless in his movements. And it's a kind of a funny one because, you know, both Colm and I went to the same school, St Michael's Enniskillen, where Peter taught PE. And even just on your first sort of day in PE, Peter was coaching the kick pass, the different types of kick pass. And Colm will probably remember this, the punt pass and the lazy pass and the terms that he used and all that. And that sort of all came out in the way he played the game. And apart from everything like that, he played with St John's in Belfast when he was a student, and he won an Antrim and an Ulster title. I think they were in the All-Ireland Club final. If I'm not mistaken, I think the incoming Uachtaráin of the GA was goals for the opposition. It might have been UCC in that final. But apart from that, he won a rank of county titles with Roslay. He did what he did with Railway Cup. He won Killyclogher's first ever county title as manager in Tyrone in 2003. He won a slap of county titles managing Roslay. And he was in the international rules coaching team with, I think, the time John O'Keefe had his breadth. You're talking about across 5 decades of excellence in playing and coaching.
That's not bad. That isn't bad. What's he like as a neighbour then?
He was a very good neighbour. I was good friends with his son Aidan. Me and him knocked around a bit. Peter, would have a droll sense of humour. He'd be well known for it. Matt, so astute. I remember Declan's talking about PE there in St Michael's. I do actually remember the very first time Peter McGinty took me for PE. I was first year, and you just wanted to impress him so much. And we played a game, and we were walking off the pitch, and Peter was talking to me, and he said, "Who's the best corner forward in Ulster?" Because that's where I played, and I said at the time, "That's James McCartan, easy." And Peter looked at me and he said, "He's also the best tackling forward in Ulster," and just walked on, which was just a real dig to say, "Colm, you're not tackling, you're not working hard enough." So he was an excellent coach, but as I said earlier, just the reverence people had of him because of how good he was and how respected he was by his peers. I think that's the big thing, as Declan said there. If everybody was picking a best team in Ireland, through that period of late 70s to early 80s, Peter McGinty's on the team, and he's on the team not any sort of tokenism. He's on the team because he's one of the best players in the country.
So that team, I think, won 2 championship matches over his inter-county career. Would that be right?
Something like that. I think he started in 1970, as Declan said, and I think his last league game was 1991. Now, he didn't play every championship year, but he had a 21-year span, and they won in 1982. They got to an Ulster final in 1983. They won a first-round game, but I don't think if they won any games prior to that, I certainly remember them losing year after year. Armagh gave them an awful hammering in Irvinstown one day, one of my earliest footballing memories. And I remember going home, that summer and wanting to be Joey Cunningham. He'd scored about 2-4 that day. And Peter, as Declan said there, it was like he ploughed a lone furrow at times. Now, of course, looking back, there's other really good players at the time, like Kieran Corrigan and things like that. Kieran Campbell, sorry. But Peter I don't know how he stuck it for so long. 21 years, he just must have had a massive love for the game and a massive love for his county as well.
What about the team that you came through on then, that reaches an All-Ireland semi-final? Are there anybody in that team who is in the reckoning for this, and how close are they to
I think there's one. Just I think Marty McGrath obviously was a fantastic player. Has his All-Star, a really combative midfielder, well respected by everybody. But I genuinely think the only one who comes close to Peter is Barry Owens, two-time All-Star. Our team was very fortunate, Gerard, because the back door saved Fermanagh football. It totally saved Fermanagh football. Peter's teams and teams in the 80s and early 90s up to late 90s, they had one chance in the championship and they were out. And that was it. And Ulster was so competitive, and you got into an annual beating in the championship, and that was you till the following year. We had the back door. We lost games in Ulster. We came back. We got experience. We, slowly chipped away and got better, and that sort of saved us. I think if there was a back door around the time that Peter played, there would be an awful lot more people who would know about him. But Barry Owens, in terms of if you were picking a Mount Rushmore of just GAA footballers in Fermanagh, you'd have Peter and Barry, and PT Tracy from the 60s, probably 1, 2, and 3, and then a good bit of a distance maybe to the rest. Barry was, what I loved about Barry was, it's very easy for players to blame other players. You blame managers and blame all this other thing. Barry never did that. Barry looked at himself first and foremost, and he was incredibly quick. He was good in the air. He was a good reader of the game, and he also had this real innate confidence about himself without being arrogant. Just a wee quick story. There was a psychologist brought in 2004 by Charlie Mulgrew, and this psychologist was going around the team, and I like to maybe talk a bit too much, so I was chatting in this meeting, and the psychologist said to me, he says, "Right, Colm, tell me, what do you think about before the game starts? What are you thinking about in the week, in the lead up to it?" And I sort of said, "Well, I'm hoping my hamstring holds up. I hope it doesn't snap in the first minute. I'm hoping that there's enough ball won at midfield. I'm hoping that there's good ball kicked inside. I'm hoping there's good movement by my fellow forwards." And he said, "Right, okay, right, no problem." And he says to me, "Who's the best player in the team?" And I said, "Barry Owens," which he was, but I also wanted to put him on the spot and make him talk to a psychologist, which he wouldn't maybe wanted to do. And Barry, he said, "Okay, same question to you, Barry. What do you think about him?" Barry sort of hemmed and hawed and sort of, tripped over his words a little bit. And then he says, "I think about catching the ball. I think about hitting me man a shoulder. And I think about passing the ball out to a teammate." And the psychologist turned around and he said, "You see the difference there, fellas? Every single thing that Colm talked about, he had no control over. Whether his hamstring snaps, whether the passes in are good, whether, he win enough ball at midfield." And he says everything Barry thinks of is positive and something he can control, and it's a good catch, a good shoulder, a good pass. Now, Barry wasn't sitting at home reading sports psychology books, I can guarantee you that. But he had an innate confidence in himself, and that rubbed off on people. And, again, you're talking about respect of your peers. Right across Ireland, Barry Owens was respected by everybody, and for a 4 or 5 year period was regarded by everybody as the best fullback in the country.
Right. Well, look, I think you've made a very good case for both of them. Declan, you were trying to outsource responsibility for which Gaelic footballer essentially ends up on your Mount Rushmore here. Let's park that part of the conversation and see where the pinch points are going to come. Because let's go through your candidates here. Who is the first non-GA person that you want to put on your Mount, Declan?
Well, you're going to have to decide the parameters of this, Ger and Dave, because Dave Gallagher came up with the Donegal debate, right, and decided because he emigrated that he wouldn't be selected. But I mean, you had a guy, Robert Kerr, who came from Enniskillen, who then he emigrated to Canada when he was 5, but he won Olympic gold in the 200 metres in London Olympics in 1908 and bronze for 100 metres. But he ran in the Canadian singlet. So, I mean, you are the ultimate arbiters of this. Is he eligible or not?
It's your mountain. I mean, I think you have to wonder if the people of Fermanagh are walking past this Mount Rushmore or wherever it is, and they see it and they're like, "But he was Canadian," or do they go, "Yeah, that's one of ours"? What do you think they do?
I think we'll take whatever we can get, to be quite honest with you. I think if there's Olympic medals going, like, then we'll. How on earth can how can we cheer on a Republic of Ireland team that's full of lads with Cockney and Brummie accents at major competitions if we're not going to claim a lad who won Olympic gold, or however long it is? But look, that's a candidate, right?
Yeah, it is absolutely a candidate. Larry Tompkins didn't make the Kildare Mount Rushmore. I don't know if this is a similar thing, but it's like, you turn your back on us there. I actually fully agree with you. I think we should be completely claiming those people. And I don't know if maybe there's a separate diaspora at Mount Rushmore that those people who do compete in international competition for other countries go on. Maybe we can come back to that one. Who are the kind of the local Fermanagh people that you definitely want to talk about here? I think is Bertie Fisher the next stop?
Yeah, Bertie Fisher's the next one. I mean, he was we possibly rare enough in the county that my father and uncles all liked an awful lot of motorsport, and we would have travelled on Saturdays to stand in the ditch freezing in a wee pair of trainers and not a heavy enough coat, watching Subaru and Imprezas mill around the corners and skate up stones. So we watched a lot of rallies, and then actually as you sort of develop a wee bit of an interest into it later years, a cousin of mine, we used to go and marshal the odd rally. I'm only saying 2 or 3 times, so I would have seen certainly and been aware of Bertie Fisher, and he was a 4-time winner of the Tarmac Rally in 1990, 92, 93 and 96. But I suppose, Bertie Fisher was a businessman, so he wasn't in the WRC circuit. He couldn't give time to that. But it is notable that, when he was into the Ulster Rally as guest entries, the people who are at the very top of professional motorsport, the Gwyndaff Evans, Alistair McRae, he beat them, in 95 and 96 in the Ulster Rally. So he was world class. He was absolutely world class. Also, the thing about Bertie Fisher is, without putting too fine point on it, there's people might be inclined to be wary, or not fully. It's the Rory McIlroy factor. Can people truly love them if they don't maybe subscribe, if they don't feel like they're one of their own? But Bertie Fisher is very much accepted by everyone across the board in the Barry McGuigan, Carl Frampton sense. And his parents were from Leitrim, who moved up, to Fermanagh. And I think that Bertie was a sort of a loved figure right across Ireland. I'm not saying that's anything. He had a charm, and he had a real talent, and he had a modesty. But he won 3 circuits of Ireland, and his favourite event was the Lakes of Killarney. And I just recall having the odd poster on the wall, as well as every other kind of sport. You had one of him in his Impreza, and he was very aggressive too, very aggressive driver, and that's part of it too. The bravery. Thursday nights, 10:40 RPM. I don't know if Colm was a fan of watching a Plum Tyndall and all that, but in Tempo, my local village, in McNally's bar, when I was 16, 17, maybe going up for a sneaky midweek pint with my father, the pub would be absolutely silent at 10:40 on a Thursday evening to watch RPM, and no one was allowed to speak during it. And that was the kind of regard that you got in certain country pockets for motorsport in the county.
I actually had completely forgotten that he died in a helicopter accident until Tommy sent on the notes, and you read the report of the funeral, and the whole community comes to a standstill.
Yeah, a desperate time, because just one of these universally loved figures, and what more do you say about that? And the toll it took across the family, it's just, awful.
So
do you want me to continue on with?
He's definitely going up, right? He's on your Mount Rushmore 100%. You're not having any doubts about him at all, are you?
No, do you know what? No, he's up there. He just is up there for me anyway. No, just the bravery of motorsport. And you see, there are other people we're going to talk about here that have sports that have mass appeal, and have mass appeal because everyone can do them. Everyone can run. Everyone can play soccer and all the rest. Not everyone can be involved in motorsport because it is a rich man's pastime. That's true. But at the same time, in order to do it, you have to be equipped with just an unbelievable bravery. Like, it's just insane, just how brave these people are. You know, about that, the next person I'm going to mention is Richie Britton. I mean, he won the Regal 600 Championship 4 times in motorbikes. He was the fastest Irishman to lap the TT circuit, nail a man. And I'll tell you, I don't know if you ever watched the documentary Road about motorcycle racing, and some of the scenes that you saw in that, like Guy Cumming, or his name escapes me now, but you know the fellow I'm talking about, the curly haired Guy Martin, and you know, Conrad Cummins that came off the veranda in the Isle of Man. That's the hairiest lap that anyone could ever do in motorcycle racing, because of what the motorcyclists call the furniture, which is trees, lampposts and all that are dotted around there. So he set the fastest time ever on that circuit. That's absolute insane bravery. And he's another man. Unfortunately, he was taking part in an event in Ballybunion, and he died in a freak accident where his engine just seized. I mean, it's just unheard of that these machines the engine would just seize in it, but that's how he met his demise. Desperate, sorry. Story. Declan Burns is going to be a contender here, and a lot of people across Ireland would be familiar with Declan Burns. Maybe if you press them, they mightn't immediately recognise the name, but then you say the word superstars or pull-ups, and they go, yeah, Declan Burns, that guy. And he came from a family of sort of athletic coaches and different things like that. His relation Fabian would have actually coached Colm with the club, and would have been very sort of ahead of his time. But anyway, Declan took part in 3 Olympics, and that was 76, 80 and 88 in canoeing. But in the mid-80s, he took part in the Superstars events, and he probably hates being talked about. But he went to Florida and came second in the world Superstars to South African rally driver.
Right.
But in the process of all that, he set the world record for pull-ups on a bar, 57 pull-ups in 60 seconds. I don't know, Ger, if you're into your gym or pull-ups or whatever.
Dave McIntyre will be able to put some context on this for us.
What sort of context do you want me to put on it?
How many chin-ups can you do without dying?
Quite a few chin-ups. Chin-ups and pull-ups are obviously 2 very different things.
Oh, are they? Sorry, explain that. I always thought they were the same.
I wouldn't. You're not a man who I need to tell that to. Well, look, chin-ups are where your palms are facing you. A lot easier than a pull-up where your palms are facing away from you, and there's an awful lot more difficulty involved in that. Okay, I didn't realise that. Sorry, I go on. Yeah. Okay, right. So
these were chin-ups, like, so his palms were facing him, but all the same, like, I mean, you know, I love the way Dave just avoided actually answering and putting the figure on it. Like, noted. But I think it was Fabian Burns, that might have been his cousin, Colm, not sure, but he told me once, well, this being drink or not, but that Declan once did 72 pull-ups in 60 seconds in training. You know, if you look at the clip, you'll find it on YouTube, like the actual rig that he was doing it on was rocking like mad, so there was a wee bit of give, and it wasn't a fully stationary bit of apparatus he was doing it on. But he apparently passed out just as soon as he completed the 70-second pull-up in 60 seconds. And if you look at his Olympic record, I know that he was sort of phased out in the rounds, in the qualifiers and all that, but I'm just researching who actually took the bronze, silver and gold medals in those Olympics. And they were all sort of East Germany, Soviet Union, Romania. Like, I'll let you draw your own conclusions on that.
What's the Olympic event, Declan? Sorry, what was it?
Sorry, kayaking.
Okay.
K2 kayak, yeah. And there was an awful lot of that. And as a matter of fact, there was out of the same club was Alan Bates canoeing around the lake. And Alan Bates actually won the Irish Superstars as well a couple of times in the mid-80s. That was, you know, 2 of those people came out of the one club. After that, we've got Sean O'Gahalpine, who's half Fermanagh. We can't forget Sean Og. And I'm down to Michael McGovern and Roy Carroll, and there's a bit of a debate about that.
Okay, well, before you get to those, because I just want to, I'm given to understand that there is some Colm relationship between your family and Barney Curley's escapades. Is that a fair? I'm not casting any aspersions here. I'm just asking the question.
No, you're not casting any aspersions, and Barney has written about it in his book, and my dad's named in the book as one of his generals, so my dad can't deny it. It's there in black and white. And
okay.
They're for all time.
Well, listen, let's start at the start here. For anybody who doesn't know what the escapades that I'm referring to are, give us the whole chapter and verse. We've got time. Barney Curley might be, certainly, a lot of people would happily have Barney Curley on a Mt Rushmore, as somebody who stuck his finger in the eye of the bookmakers.
Absolutely, and a fascinating life too, Ger. He went to England at 16 with his dad to work and sent home the money. He came back to Ireland. He was from Irvinstown originally. He went to study in the priesthood, was studying for the priesthood for 18 months. He then got TB, and he said he was one of only 3 people on the ward that he was in to survive the TB. Went back to the priesthood. It didn't suit him. Came out. Eventually found himself in bookmaking and training horses and professional gambler and all the rest.
An obvious segue from the priesthood to bookmaking.
Well, funny enough, I was thinking, it's a very Irish thing, isn't it? The priesthood and gambling and all the rest of it, and love of horses and that. But he pulled off, probably the biggest betting coup of all time, certainly in Irish racing, 1975. With a horse called Yellow Sam, and it was running at Bellewstown. And look, it's a bygone era, so anybody under 30 or under 25 is not going to really, isn't going to really understand this until it's all explained through. But basically, what happened was, if you put a bet on a horse in a bookmaker's shop in 1975, the price you were paid out on was determined by what price the horse was on the race course. So if a horse was 10-1 the race on the course, that's what you got paid out. So, but this horse, Yellow Sam, was being trained to win this race, you could say. And the relationship that Barney Curley had with my dad was that my dad ran a shop for him, a bookmaker shop, and they were good friends. And my dad and his brother were 2 of his generals. Now, my dad was a general in Sligo and Donegal, which meant that when Barney phoned him to say that the coup was going to happen, that my dad then had 20 or 30 people who he would call and tell them to go into bookmaker shops at a certain time, at the same time, and put on the bets on this horse at this race. So that happened all throughout the country. So you can imagine all this money is going on this horse in betting shops throughout the country at the same time. Now, there's no mobile phones. You're not going to WhatsApp somebody. So bookmakers then what they try to do is, in that case, is they try and lay some of the money off. And the only way they could lay it off was to phone the course where the race was happening and to put money on the horse there. Now, that did 2 things. It took away some of their liability, but it also drove the price of the horse down. So the horse might have went from 20-1 down to 3 and 4-1. So that meant then anybody who backed the horse and it won a lot less than what they would have won. So how were they going to get around this? Well, there was only 1 or 2 phone lines into Bellewstown at that time. And one of them, a fella from Irvinstown, his name was Benny O'Hanlon. He went into the phone box and lifted the phone and pretended to phone a hospital to talk to a dying aunt, which was completely fictitious. And he spent 20 minutes, and Barney's written about this in his book, he spends 20 minutes on the phone talking to this fictitious aunt, and nobody can get through to the racecourse. So every bookmaker in Ireland is trying to get through to Bellewstown to get this horse backed, to get the price down, and they can't get through. And the horse goes and it runs, and it wins at 20-1 by 2.5 lengths. And there's an awful lot of money made. I think at the time it was 300,000 Irish punt was the official figure put on it, which equivalent now is 1.7 million. And that was on one horse.
Not a bad afternoon's work.
Not a bad afternoon's work. And I know that that our house had a yellow Cortina for a few years, and people used to wondered was it a yellow Sam. But my dad actually doesn't really talk about it. And I remember when the book came out from Barney Curley, and he flicked to the index and he seen his name was mentioned on a couple of pages. He was like, "Well, you know," I said, "The secret's out now."
Sorry, Jared. There's one postscript to that story, and you can ask Colm what he called his firstborn son.
Well, yeah, my firstborn son is called Sam, but it's not because of Yellow Sam. Although the amount of Fermanagh people who have said it to me, you know, and it's funny, yeah, that my firstborn son was called Sam, is right.
Purely coincidental.
Coincidental, yeah, absolutely. My wife will tell you that too.
Named after Sam Maguire, no doubt.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Is Barney Curley a candidate for this? Is this, like, you said you were a quirky county at the very start. Samuel Beckett, by virtue of the fact that he doesn't like Enniskillen, is off. But Declan, is there a case to be made for somebody like Barney Curley?
I don't know how I became the overall judge on this, but yeah, of course, let's chuck him in and compare him. Like, you know, I mean, I could see us ending up with about 7 names, and really somebody going to have to make a call. But yeah, absolutely, what a story.
You wanted to talk about Roy Carroll, and there was a goalkeeping issue that was the last one that we wanted to talk about here.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, Colm has another couple of clinkers for you, but I'll let him get to that. My sort of last sort of credible contenders here. Apart from, there's loads of people, you know, there's people that deserve just a cursory mention, right? Like Desi McGlinchey, for example, is a surf kayak world champion, you know, I mean, and even, you know, he's one of these people that just go about the county unnoticed and nobody really kind of knows a great deal about it. Jimmy McCoy, the guy that was in that famous picture standing up to the haka in the 80s, he may not have played for Ireland all that much, but he had an unbelievable career with Ulster when they were back before rugby was in any way fashionable, and they were winning all the provincial series. And like even someone like, say, Malachy O'Rourke, for what he has achieved in management, you know, Rory Gallagher, even though he's just probably not at the level of other Gaelic footballers, he does have the record score in Ulster Championship match, and he has won county titles in Dublin and Belfast and won an All-Ireland club. So him and Ronan are the only people with senior All-Ireland medals in Fermanagh, like grade A, if you want to put it that way. And he's also helped manage Donegal to the All-Ireland title in 2012, just in passing. But when we come to the goalkeepers, you're sort of tied between two, right? Everyone can play soccer. Everyone does grow up playing soccer to some extent. And you've got, I can't really decide whether Roy Carroll or Michael McGovern is the person to go for here, because Roy Carroll played for Man United, and you can't put a price on that. Like, you know, one of the greatest, biggest, most successful clubs in the world, he played for them. And he won a Premier League, he won an FA Cup. Now, he only made about 46 appearances for them. And he sort of came slap bang in that period where Alex Ferguson had a horrendous run of goalkeepers. I mean, Ferguson sort of, he wasn't great at picking goalkeepers. I think he got lucky with Schmeichel. He got him very cheap. But between Schmeichel and De Gea, like, you know, he you know, I mean, this is a man who let Mark Bosnich go because he didn't think that he had it. And then he bought Mark Bosnich, and then he realised, like, I think on the first day of training, they asked him to do an exercise that Peter Schmeichel used to be able to do, and he couldn't do it. And he just wrote him off on his first day of training after spending so much money getting him in. But Carroll was there, Man United. He won Premier League. He won the FA Cup. I suspect he got a move to Man U too early in life, to be quite honest with you. And goalkeepers don't really hit their peak until their 30s. He possibly had an underwhelming career after that, flipping around, the Greek leagues. He won a Greek league, fair enough, but it's a long way from being the Man U number one and sort of, being groomed to take over from Fabian Barthez. Michael McGovern, I tell you, the longevity and how long he has stuck his career is a credit to him. He started off on Celtic's books, and he went out to the following clubs in Stranraer, St Johnstone, Dundee United, Ross County, Falkirk, and then he was at Hamilton for a good spell, and he's on the bench for Norwich. He was on the bench the other night, actually. He only got a second cap for Northern Ireland in 2015, but then he established himself as the main man for Michael O'Neill, and it was the game where they lost 1-0 to Germany in the Euro.
I was at that
2016, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and this is what elevates him. I'm not saying that he was better goalkeeper or right. I don't know enough about soccer, and I don't watch enough soccer to make that distinction. Germany had 26 shots that day. A German team with the strikers they had, you'll know more about who was on the field that day than me, but 26 shots, and he saved all but one, and that was a sort of a scuffed out finish in the end. 9 of them were on target. When he came back into the dressing room, all the Northern Ireland players stood and gave him a round of applause. He won man of the match, and when you win man of the match in a major tournament like that, it elevates you. It puts you onto a different stratosphere. I mean, how many Republic of Ireland players actually won man of the match in their European and World Cup games? It'd be an interesting one to actually look at, because perhaps maybe, Paul McGrath you're talking about.
Roy Keane, probably, in 94. I think Roy Keane might have been man of the match in a couple of games as well.
Right.
But it's a very elevated level that you're talking about. I don't know if anybody in that... Did Wes get man of the match in the 1-1 draw with Sweden? I'm not sure. Okay, so there's a conundrum there between the goalkeepers, and obviously football being such a universal sport, it's got an extra weight behind it. Colm, I want to ask you about Brendan Dolan. I'm not a huge darts aficionado myself, but I understand that it is also something that has universal appeal and that everybody can do it. And so, what's Brendan Dolan's story, and what's your relationship with him?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the first thing to say is that, I've done something. I think people who watch darts fall into 2 categories. You've those who don't think it's a sport and those who do think it's a sport. But, and the former probably look at it, a little bit of a snobby attitude about, it's a pub game and all the rest. I love darts, so that's sort of out in the open at the start. I think it's a fantastic sport. And my relationship with Brendan was, I just sort of knew him when I was younger, about 4 or 5 years older than me. And I spent the summer sort of travelling around with him midweek to go to tournaments. I played a bit of darts, not very good, very poorly actually. I would normally crash out in round 1 or round 2, and Brendan would go on and invariably win the thing. I'm talking about in Drumshambo and Sligo, across Leitrim in the Donegal. Just would have played tournaments. He'd have been 26, 27 at the time, and his dream was always to be a pro dart player. But the problem was, because he was based here and the money competitions were in England, most of them, the cost was so prohibitive to him. But he stuck at it, and I mean, Brendan Dolan, you're talking about excellence in your field. Brendan Dolan at one stage of his career, 2015, was the 10th best dart thrower in the world. That's what his PDC ranking was. And he's from a wee village of Belcoo on the border of Black Lion, on the Cavan border. So, I mean, that's a phenomenal level of excellence. If people might remember 2011, he threw the first ever televised 9-darter with a double start. So he got the double tops, double 20, treble 20, treble 20, 180 with his next visit, and finished with a 161 on the bull against James Wade. He reached the final of that competition. It was the World Grand Prix, and Phil Taylor beat him. Phil Taylor beat everybody at that stage of his career. you know, and he's still playing at a high level. He's now ranked 32nd in the world. But I mean, just last October there, he lost to he beat Gerwyn Price and Peter Wright on the way to a Players' Championship victory in England. So I think people, you know, think about darts and go, oh, you know, as I say, it's a pub game and all the rest. But it's, you know, it's a very difficult game. I would say to anybody, go practice it for 2 hours for a month and see if you're any better, because I don't think you'll be that much better. And then turn around and tell them, and you see that wee green thing called double 16, you know, if you throw at that, I'm going to give you 500 quid, and see how many people get close to it. It's a real sport where it separates people in terms of mentality and temperament. And I just think that Brendan Dolan at one stage was the 10th best player in the world at it. And I think that's pretty good.
I think, Colin, the way you've explained it there, I haven't really heard it explained like that. For me, it always looks like it's Brexit down the pub. That's the crap that goes on around it that I'm not a big fan of. I mean, I blame Barry Hearn essentially for turning it into this kind of, hey, let's all get lagered up, as opposed to the actual drama of what you're talking about there, which, you know, when you explain it like that, sounds decent.
Decent, that's good.
Can I just see Brendan Dolan, because it's such a small county, there's a soccer club, Lisbon United, that a lot of those Balcoo boys were attracted to, even though it's 20 mile away, but they all ended up playing soccer for Lisbon. And myself and Brendan, for a time, were on either wing of the Thirds team. So I know Brendan from I was a teenager, and we were both thoroughly mediocre soccer players, but he was the most relaxed person I've possibly ever met in my life. And a few years, well, about a decade back, I asked if I could go along to his house and do a feature with him, where he sat in his living room with an actual lath, a 2x1 lath that was screwed into the floor in his house in Balcoo, and just threw for hours and hours. And this was a damp Monday morning in October, looking across to the Hanging Rock, and you're just saying, you know what? There's a man on a Monday morning and he's sitting for 4 hours throwing, and he said he would have a bit of lunch and go for a bit of a walk, and he'd go back to the dartboard again and throw another couple of hours in the evening. And you're saying to yourself, you know, what other kind of sports people spend as much time at their craft as this? So, you know, Colm explains it far better than I ever will, but for the sheer amount of hard work that he actually puts into it, it should never be diminished, or it should never be underestimated.
No, I think, you know, when you're talking about it like that, these are the type of stories that the sport needs to maybe make more of. So look, we've gone way over time here, but we do have to pick four. That's the whole point of the Mt Rushmore. There are just four heads on it. Declan Burns and Bertie Fisher, I think everybody agrees on that. You both want to put up Peter McGinty, I think. I guess it's just the question about the fourth, or unless Peter McGinty comes down and Owens goes up instead, Barry Owens, and then you also have room for one more. So, Declan, what do you want to do?
Who have we got? We've got Peter McGinty, Declan Burns, Bertie Fisher.
Yeah.
Be very hard to argue against Barney Curley.
So Barney Curley is your fourth.
And I think I'll get agreement from Colm, unless he's pushing for Brendan Dolan.
Yeah, I'm pushing for Brendan Dolan, I have to say. I think Barney Curley is the punter's friend, and it's a phenomenal story what he's done. Also a phenomenal philanthropist who is a Direct Aid for Africa charity, makes a phenomenal amount of money for good causes. But look, I go back to excellence, and to me, you know, Barney Curley was never one of the best trainers in horse racing. He was one of the best ever professional gamblers. But I think that the 10th best dart player in the world at a time just pushes him off for me.
Okay, fair enough. That is your right. You get to make one change. So Fermanagh Mt Rushmore is Peter McGinty, Declan Burns, Bertie Fisher and Brendan Dolan. So no Barry Owens. Are you both happy enough as we leave this now to say no Barry Owens on Fermanagh's Mt Rushmore?
I'm not happy at all, but I want Peter McIntyre on it. So it's look, either of them. But I mean, you know, it's just a tough one. It's just a tough one.
And Declan Bogue, where is this Mt Rushmore in Fermanagh?
Well, if it was in the Hanging Rock in Balcoo, Brendan would only have to look out of his front window to see it. So it might be as good a place as anyway, but we're not really blessed. Culkey Mountain at the Stairway to Heaven, as it's laughably called now, might be the best place for it. What do you think, Colm?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the one. Although Cavan will claim half of it, though.
They do, anyway.
Colm and Declan, you've done a great job. Brendan Dolan, Bertie Fisher, Declan Burns and Peter McGinnity are on Fermanagh's Mt Rushmore. Thanks, lads, for joining us this morning. You've been great sports along the way, and I hope have fostered some debate and interest in Fermanagh's rich and varied and quirky sporting culture.
All right, cheers, thanks.
Cheers.
That's Fermanagh's Sporting Mt Rushmore in the books for this week, and that's pretty much all we've got.
OTB AM's Mt Rushmore.
And that's pretty much all we've got time for on the show this morning. At 10:15, we've gone way over here on OTB AM. My thanks to Dave McIntyre for being part of the show this morning. We will see you on tomorrow. Dave, I think you're back with us on Thursday morning, is that right?
I am, yeah, looking forward to it, Chair.
Coming up today from 12 o'clock, the only place that you can hear Alan Quinlan's interview with John Kerwin is on the OTB Sports app. Just downloads, head over to OTB Sports Radio and you can hear it live at 12 o'clock. And if you've missed anything this morning, you can catch it back through the OTB AM podcast. Download the Sports app, subscribe to OTB AM, get it every morning. We timestamp the whole thing so you can flick through it whatever way you want. OTB AM live weekdays from 7:30 to 10. We'll see you tomorrow morning. Best of luck.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the ball.
Salah takes a shot.